The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann Book Club with Thom Hartmann University. The book we're reading today is The American Revolution of 1800, written by Dan Sisson with a little bit of help from me and mostly edited by me. I wrote a foreword for it. But it's an absolutely brilliant history of the election of Thomas Jefferson and the times. So reading from chapter 1, page 9, starting out, a quote from Thomas Paine: "For it is the nature and intention of a constitution to prevent governing by party." Oh, really? So often in the past century, the political history of America reveals a paralysis in the highest levels of our government. Legislation fails to pass, budgets are voted down, compromise seems impossible, and the problems of the nation are neither addressed nor solved. There have been brief periods, of course, when this was not the case. The New Deal is usually held up as an example of a time when American politicians actually came together to fundamentally transform the nature and the political landscape of our country. But in the generations since then, more often than not, we've seen gridlock rather than collaboration. Conventional wisdom says that's the way it should be. The founders of this country, the men who wrote the Constitution, wanted there to be a loyal opposition to serve as a balance against excessive power in the hands of any one political party or even president. That's conventional wisdom. Not only is that not true, but this pervasive myth has done considerable harm to our nation and continues to do so. The men in power from 1790 to 1801 did not even remotely conceive of the modern two-party system. In fact, the opposite is true. They wish to consolidate and perpetuate a one-party system in politics in the United States, and were successful in their lifetimes. The terms party and faction have had such a long history that they were widely assumed by American statesmen to be part of human nature. This, at least, was the approach taken by the two men most responsible for establishing the theoretical guidelines of the early republic, the early American Republic. James Madison and Alexander Hamilton attempted to analyze the terms in light of their influence on the political system. Their Federalist essays presented an analysis of party and faction that is more than consistent with the history of the terms we've reviewed. Madison referred to the violence of faction as a dangerous vice characteristic of free governments. By faction, Madison wrote, "I understand a number of citizens, whether amounting to a majority or a minority of the whole, who are united and actuated by some common impulse of passion or of interest adverse to the rights of other citizens or to the permanent and aggregate interests of the community." In other words, faction is anti-America. He continued, "The latent causes of faction are thus sown in the nature of man, and we see them everywhere." Thus, party, as Madison understood it, was not something of recent origin. Parties have been around since the beginning of man. And he noted, quote, "The most numerous party, or in other words, the most powerful faction, must be expected to prevail." He ends his analysis on this note: "To secure the public good and provide rights against the danger of such a faction, that is then the great object to which our inquiries are directed." Thus, Madison captured the essence of the term faction and party as they were understood by his contemporaries. The faction and party were inescapably rooted in human nature and produced violence, zeal, animosity, oppression, and danger, all adverse to the interests of the community. He added, quote, "Men of factious tempers, or of local prejudices, or of sinister designs may by intrigue, by corruption, or by other means first obtain the suffrages, the vote, and then betray the interests of the people." His conclusion is that factions must be broken and controlled. They are at all costs not to be legitimately recognized or encouraged. Madison was not alone in his aversion to faction and party. Alexander Hamilton, too, warns the reader, quote, "Ambition, avarice, personal animosity, party opposition, and many other motives, not more laudable than these, were typical of that intolerant spirit which has at all times characterized political parties." end of quote. Registering his disgust for faction, Hamilton continued, "It is impossible to read the history of the petty republics of Greece and Italy without feeling sensations of horror and disgust at the rapid succession of revolutions by which they were kept in a state of perpetual vibration between the extremes of tyranny and anarchy." Hamilton, we might note, connects ancient history with modern America. "The tempestuous situation," he writes, "from which Massachusetts has scarcely emerged," he was talking about Shays' Rebellion, "evinces the dangers of this kind are not merely speculative. Who could determine what might have been the issue of her late convulsions if the malcontents had not been headed by a Caesar or a Cromwell," end of quote. In Federalist number 77, he describes the influence of faction and party intrigue, connections, and, quote, personal influence in government in a way that was characteristic of the terms from classical times through the age of Robert Walpole. Hamilton wrote, "Every mere council of appointment, however constituted, will be a conclave in which cabal and intrigue will have their full scope. And as each member will have his friends and connections to provide for, the desire of mutual gratification will beget a scandalous bartering of votes and bargaining for places." What is worth noting here is not only Hamilton's description of the influence of party and faction upon an administration, but his general description of politics. He's describing the politics of England for the previous century and a half. Moreover, he understands that encouraging party and faction at the theoretical as well as the practical level guaranteed that the emergent system of American politics would be propelled into the futile violence and dissension that had plagued every republic in history. Throughout the remainder of his political career, Hamilton reserved a special contempt for parties. The American Revolution of 1800 by Dan Sisson and Thom Hartmann.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you, and super pleased to have with us to open our show, Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator, welcome back to the program.
Great to be with you, Tom.
It has been
too long.
Well, it's not, not only has it been too long, but it has been amazing to watch what you have been doing all over the country, going to these red states. I mean, it's just, I am so impressed, and we've been regularly reporting on it. Our your fan base on this show just loves it. So,
well, Tom, let me say a word on that. I am not a believer in red state, blue state. I believe that where you have working class people, we have people struggling to keep their heads above water economically. Those are parts of the country that should be voting and fighting for progressive ideals. So when you go to a state like West Virginia, which is one of the poorest states in this country, or Kentucky, another very poor state, our job is to reach out to our brothers and sisters in those states and talk about what a progressive agenda means in terms of raising the minimum wage, in terms of health care for all, in terms of making public colleges and universities tuition-free. These folks should be our allies. We've got to start reaching out to them, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Well, and apropos of that, I understand Mitch McConnell is going to shorten the August vacation for senators, and that he's pushing forward with this crazy Trump care bill.
Right.
What's your take on all this?
It's interesting as to why he's doing that. My own guess is that the reason probably is he doesn't want to send his members home to have to defend this incredibly dangerous piece of legislation. This is legislation that has the support, according to the last national poll, of 12% of the American people. I myself don't understand how 12% could support it because it's such a terrible piece of legislation. This is a bill throws 22 million people off of health insurance, raises premiums substantially for older workers, defunds Planned Parenthood, and cuts Medicaid by some $800 billion. And then, in the midst of it all, it gives $500 billion in tax breaks to the wealthiest 2%, to the pharmaceutical industry, to the insurance company, and to other major corporations. Nobody in America supports that. That's what they're pushing. We've got to defeat it.
Why are they pushing this? Is this ideology, or is this the paymaster? What's going on here?
It's two things. Number one, it's ideology. You know as well as anybody what the Koch brothers' agenda is. And we have to credit the Koch brothers for being reasonably honest. What they have done over the years is poured hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into the political process around an ideology that says we want to get the government out of almost every sector of American life, maybe except the military. We don't believe, according to the Koch brothers, don't want to cut Medicare. They want to eliminate Medicare. They want to eliminate Medicaid. They want to eliminate Social Security. They don't believe in public education. That is their ideology. Now, they can't get it all, but this is a major step forward. When you cut $800 billion from Medicaid, that is a major step forward on the Koch brothers' agenda. So that's number one. It is ideology. Number two, it is simply the very wealthy wanting more tax breaks. The rich are getting much richer, but billionaires are not content. They want even more tax breaks. This would give them several $100 billion in tax breaks over a 10-year period.
This week is also, today, in fact, specifically a day of action. Big internet companies from Amazon to one of the big porn sites, oddly enough, are all protesting this attack on net neutrality, on the idea of the internet as a utility like the phone company. Instead, these internet service providers want to be able to slice and dice it and say, oh, you want to get news with your package? That's an extra $10 a month, stuff like that. What's happening in the Senate with regard to net neutrality, and what are your thoughts?
Well, the difficulty now is that we have an administration that does not support net neutrality. An administration, one of the things, Tom, all of the attention, or so much of the media attention, goes to every absurd tweet that Trump sends out. We don't know what's coming today, what came 2 weeks ago, and that's what media focuses on. The real truth about the Trump administration is that this is an administration in an unprecedented way that is out there defending the billionaire class and doing what the wealthy and large corporations want. And the big, powerful media interests do not like net neutrality. They want to make as much money as they can from the net, and that's what they're trying to do. So I support all of those people who are trying to make sure that the internet remains a democratic force in society, that if you're a small business, you're going to have the same type of opportunities as if you're a large corporation. If you're a small media group, you'll have the same opportunities as CNN or the New York Times. That is something that has got to be preserved.
Yeah. And finally, I'm curious, the news cycle has been, your thoughts on this, the news cycle has been absolutely seized by Donald Trump Jr. and his meetings with this Russian lawyer and all this other stuff. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think this is very serious stuff. I think we cannot underestimate the threat and the efforts that Russia has made trying to undermine American democracy. Obviously, as everybody knows, what the intelligence committees in the House and the Senate, and what Bob Mueller are looking at, is the very simple question of whether there was actual collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. Yesterday, I think, brought forth some pretty damaging information. But what we have to do, and this is, you can't be jumping the gun and you can't rush to judgment. There is a process that has to go on, and I strongly support that process. The American people have got to be confident, no matter what their political points of view are. You like Trump, you don't like Trump, that this process is objective and fair, and that's what has to take place.
Yeah, I think that Don Jr. Made it fairly clear that he was perfectly willing to collude with a foreign power, whether he did or not. But I have been calling from the get-go for an independent commission to investigate this, to look into what happened, specifically with regard to Russia, more generally with regard to things like if Russia can hack our voting machines, who else can and who else might have, all this kind of stuff.
Real issues, Tom.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked, but we talked about this 5 or 6 years ago.
Yep.
And I think people thought we were crazy about, talking about paper ballots, for example, which is what they do in Canada. But I think where we are right now is that I don't want to impede this. So we got an intelligence committee going in the Senate. You got one in the House. Hopefully, and I think they are in the Senate, working in a bipartisan way. I think there are honest Republicans who are legitimately concerned, as you say, not only about the attacks from Russia on our election system, but the potential for what this breeds. I mean, what's going to happen next year. That has got to take place. So you got Mueller doing his work at the House and the Senate Intelligence Committees. So I just hope this thing goes forward as methodically and quickly as it can.
Yeah, let's get some truth here.
Yep.
Senator Bernie Sanders, it's always a pleasure and an honor to have you with us, sir. Thank you so much for the great work you're doing. Thank you.
Well, you keep dropping by as well, Tom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And it's nice to hear from Bernie. I mean, it's always so nice to hear from Bernie. He's such a good guy. You know, more than anything else, Bernie restores my faith in humanity. You know, I mean, here's a guy who's been a politician for 30, 40 years, something like that. I mean, a long time. And, you know, with just an absolute and utter commitment to what he believes is the truth. And I share his belief, by the way. I'll say that. You know, and it used to be in the Republican Party, there were people who subscribed to what they believed were true. You know, I might not have agreed with them, but I'm thinking of people like my dad. I think, you know, some of the old Eisenhower conservatives who were, you know, just step by step and, you know, slow but gradual change, and labor is good and Social Security is good, but let's not go crazy. I mean, that was kind of the conservative thing back in the 60s, 50s, and 70s. But now on the Republican side, you know, with the possible exception of Susan Collins, I can't think of a single member of the House of Representatives or the Senate that seems to have the courage of their convictions on the Republican side. On the Democratic side, there's no shortage of them. I mean, there are still a few Democratic sellouts, basically, but the vast majority of Democrats are, you know, good people who really care and are doing the right thing. So, anyhow, Kim in Butte, Montana. Hey, Kim, thanks for watching us on YouTube today. What's up?
Thank you for taking my call. So I don't know if you're aware of this situation, but I am in the pilot program for the state of Montana industrial hemp growers.
Oh, how cool is that?
It's very cool. However, a little known fact is the area that I'm growing my 12 acres of hemp, which I've 2 years researched and got federally licensed. I have a DEA license to have the seed and went through all of their hoops. And I have seed in the ground, and then the Bureau of Reclamation wouldn't let me water it. So my crop has died.
Oh,
It's in the process of dying. And they won't give me an answer as to why.
Why couldn't you water it?
Because the Bureau of Reclamation is saying that there's a policy. Their policy is outdated. They have not updated it to the 2014 Farm Bill. And so I'm desperate here. I'm just trying to get the word out. This is absolutely ludicrous.
This seems to me, Kim, like the kind of thing that you should be talking to John Tester about. He's your senator, isn't he?
John Tester has already sent a letter into the head of the department, or the head of Bureau of Reclamation.
Uh-huh.
And, so there's a lot of people working on it, but I still think there's more to be done.
Yeah.
There's an article in Reason magazine that explains a little bit more, but I have the backing of the state program, you know, the state attorney.
Would they have allowed you to do like drip irrigation as opposed to watering?
Well, the canal, I'm not allowed to access the water. So I'm leasing the ground, and I can't afford, not.
Oh, so you'd have to drill a well. Is that the deal?
Yes, I would. I could drill a well if I had deeded water, but the Bureau of Reclamation is responsible for 10 million farm acres in the West.
Whoa.
And so this has a huge implication if industrial hemp is going to take off. How are people going to water it?
There you go. Kim, I gotta run. Thank you for the call. Thanks for watching us. We'll be back.
Hi, I'm Heather with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving of donations, volunteering, or even spreading the word, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to sustain for more than 20 years. Now, you can give to Free Speech TV through the Branch of Gratitude. This program is a sustainable way to give that reduces waste through paper mailing, postage, and staff hours. By choosing to participate in the Branch of Gratitude, you are joining hands with the socially conscious community and sending a message to the world that Free Speech TV is not only here to stay, it is here to thrive. Please call 877-378-8669 or go online to freespeech.org. Make a difference and join the Branch of Gratitude today.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. There's a lot going on. Today is the kind of national day, well, not kind of, it is the National Day of Action with regard to the open internet. The Congressional Progressive Caucus, this is Raul Grijalva and Mark Pocan are the co-directors, the co-chairs, and they just issued a joint statement saying, during this era of corporate consolidation and growing attacks on free speech, now more than ever, it is vital to protect the open internet and net neutrality. FCC Chairman Ajit Pai and Republicans in Congress are attempting to roll back critical net neutrality protections so that big telecom companies can control the content and control the price of internet access. We can't let this happen. Net neutrality spurs innovation, education, and small d democratic engagement by leveling the playing field for everyone. It must be protected and strengthened. And, you know, the Republicans are just going full tilt boogie on this thing. Okay, so there's that. There's, of course, the Donald Trump news, Donald Trump Jr. As I mentioned to Bernie and, you know, as I said yesterday, I'm not sure if a crime has been committed here. If it has been, it probably has to do with campaign finance law, which says that you can't take things of value. But it doesn't say you can't be a sucker or an idiot. But clearly, Don Jr. was perfectly willing to collaborate with a foreign government. That's what he thought he was doing. Now, his lawyer is saying, hey, I wasn't here from the crime. Maybe she was, maybe she wasn't, whatever. I mean, well, this was one of the questions that was asked of Christopher Wray this morning. He's going to be the new FBI director in all probability. And as I recall, it was Sheldon Whitehouse said, you know, what should Donald Trump Jr. have done? And he said, you should have called the FBI, which is what I said yesterday and the day before. And it's like, okay, you know, so that's, you know, that's happening. The Larsen A ice shelf, there's these, Antarctica, by the way, it's at the bottom of the Earth. It's the southernmost pole. And Antarctica right now is in the middle of winter. Now, if you go to arctic-news.blogspot.com, in the middle of summer, a couple of days ago, in the Arctic, at the North Pole, it was raining. It's not supposed to rain. They had a cyclonic storm, a huge storm up there that busted up a bunch of ice. You've got rain. You've got temperatures that in some cases are 60 degrees warmer than they should be in the Arctic. Now, down in the Antarctic, down in the south, there's this, I mean, it's a continent, right? It's like the size of Australia, and it's maybe the size of the United States, and which is about the same as Australia. And it's covered with, you know, ice sheets that are a quarter to a half a mile thick, or more in some places. And in 1995, the Larsen A ice shelf collapsed. Now, these were shelves. This is where the ice is literally out over the ocean, and it's suspended on a couple of islands on either side that are kind of holding it in place, and the opening of the, this broad, wide area that would otherwise be kind of seashore. But Larsen A collapsed in 1995, and it concerned a lot of people. You know, what's this going to do? But because it was ice over water, it doesn't raise sea levels. It's, you know, so it's theoretically not a problem. In 2002, the Larsen B shelf collapsed. And again, you know, it was like, well, you know, this shouldn't be happening this rapidly and in this big a scale, but ice shelves do collapse. I mean, it's a normal part of the process of glaciation. Glaciers slowly move down to the sea, and when they get there, pieces fall off the end of them. We call them icebergs. But the Larsen C ice shelf, which is massive, I mean, it's literally the size of the state of Delaware, huge. And it's one of the last things that is blocking the ice that is on land. So again, the Larsen C ice shelf falling into the ocean is not going to immediately cause Miami to be submerged. But when the ice behind it comes down the road, it could get real problematic. And the Larsen C ice shelf yesterday afternoon or last evening collapsed into the sea. And this is what Dr. Michael Oppenheimer, professor of geosciences and international affairs at Princeton University, said. He said, the situation with the Larsen C ice shelf is a combination of fascinating and troubling. We are seeing a microcosm of the future, a future that may already be inevitable, and if not, will likely be so if we transgress the 2 degrees Celsius warming target. And now, apropos of that, there's a real interesting debate breaking out into the open right now among climate scientists, where on the one hand, you've got people, Joe Rahm published a really fascinating piece about this morning over at Think Progress, saying, you know, there's a small possibility of really, really bad stuff happening. And there was a piece in the New Yorker about this over the weekend that kind of prompted this whole thing. The small probability of really bad stuff happening, and we need to talk about that. And then on the other hand, you've got Dr. Michael Mann and a few others. Dr. Mann's piece was posted over on his Facebook page saying, wait a minute, if we talk about how horrible it can get, it will paralyze people. I want to speak to that. I'm going to get into it right after the break. We've talked on this program before about motivation strategies. In fact, I wrote a book called Cracking the Code on the air. I basically kind of, you know, did my riff in 10, 12 chapters over a couple of weeks, and we assembled it into this book. And one entire chapter is on what motivates people and what paralyzes people. And yeah, it is true that some people experience a certain amount of paralysis when they think all is lost. But it takes a hell of a lot of all is lost to engender that paralysis. Look at people who have literally, you know, terminal conditions. They're diagnosed with cancer. They don't give up. I mean, sometimes they do. Some people do. It's kind of a personal thing. Some people just go, oh, God, that's it. I'm going to die. And, you know, and just roll over and wait for it to happen. But most people fight. You know, when they get a cancer diagnosis, they don't go, oh, that's it. Instead, they go, well, you know, where's the chemo? Where's the surgery? I want some x-rays. You know, do something. And so, you know, this idea that we shouldn't scare the chickens, we shouldn't scare the people, we should, you know, it's like, you know, the who will tell the children, I think is patronizing, if nothing else. And we need to be talking not only about the good stuff that can happen, which if we launched a Manhattan-style project, as Joe Rahm talks about in Progress today, we launched a Manhattan-style project, we could do some really great stuff worldwide. But if we do nothing, there could be hell to pay.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Joe Rahm, in his piece over at thinkprogress.org, has a graphic of basically the entire United States looking like the Dust Bowl in 1930. That bad by 2100.
And welcome to Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from the book Screwed, The Undeclared War Against the Middle Class and What We Can Do About It, a book I wrote in 2006, but is frankly more relevant today than it was back then. Reading from page 11. There's a battle waging today in America that will decide the future of the middle class. On the one side are those like Jefferson who believe that if free people can govern themselves and have the right to organize their government to create a strong middle class, which will in turn keep the government democratic, small d. On the other side are those like Thomas Hobbes who believe that only a small elite can and should govern, and that the people should be willing to pay the price of poverty in exchange for security. Those who don't want democracy understand that a middle class will always work to create democracy, which is why they are so opposed to middle class creating government policies like free public education, limits to the concentration of ownership in the media, and social safety nets like universal health care and Social Security. They understand that such policies have and always will bring about a strong and vibrant middle class, which will, in turn, both demand and create a more democratic society, again, small d. Who are these people who want to undermine the middle class? They often call themselves conservatives, but those people are not true conservatives. They don't want to conserve or protect the America the founders gave us. I call them cons because they're conning America. My dad was a staunch Republican all his life, but he didn't believe that a small elite should rule America. He was glad the government provided safety nets like Social Security and Medicare and made unionization possible. My dad and most of the other real conservatives I've known believed in the middle class and believed in democracy. The battle we face in America today is not between liberal and conservative, nor is it between big D Democrat and Republican. The battle we face today is between those who want to protect our democratic heritage, small d, and the cons who want to create an America that benefits only a small elite organized around corporate power and inherited wealth. There are two types of cons who have worked together to screw the middle class. I call them the predator cons and the true believer cons. Predator cons are simply greedy. They use politics and/or philosophy as a cover for their theft of our common resources and as a rationalization for their growing wealth in the face of growing societal poverty and inequality. They're not conservatives in any true sense. They are not interested in conserving American values or even in keeping American wealth in America. They're the ones who ship jobs overseas, lobby for tax breaks from Congress, fight against the inheritance tax, and reincorporate their companies offshore to avoid paying U.S. corporate taxes. The predator cons' rationalization for their obscene pileup of wealth is that they're simply playing the game by the existing rules. And that's true to a large extent, except that they're also the ones who bought and paid for the politicians who set up the rules for them. They've conned America into believing that they care about the American economy when all they care about is making money for themselves. A great example of a predatory con is NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. These agreements lower wages for American workers. They do not create well-paying jobs in America. They create record trade deficits. Cons don't even try to argue that free trade agreements are good for America anymore. Arguments like these, such as the Central American Free Trade Agreement, CAFTA, are passed now by a single vote in the Senate in 2005, only because corporate America needs them to reap tremendous profits from the low wages they extract in non-unionized, non-democratic, and socially disorganized countries. Predator cons succeed in passing these agreements by threatening to withhold campaign funds from anyone who dares to oppose them. It's an old game that the robber barons of the 19th century knew well how to play. The second type of con is perhaps even more dangerous than the predators. They're the true believers. Just as true believers in communism brought about the death of tens of millions in Russia from the time of the Bolshevik Revolution until the fall of the Berlin Wall, so too the true believers in laissez-faire capitalism believe that if only government would go away, everything would be just fine. Employers would become benevolent, employees would become enthusiastic, and bureaucratic inefficiencies would just vanish. These so-called free marketers aren't bothered by the consolidation of companies or the loss of competition that happens when markets are unregulated. Like Thomas Hobbes, the true believers assume that society will run best when run by the small elite that ended up on the top. They believe in corporatocracy, the view that an economic aristocracy benefits the working class because wealth will trickle down from above to below. Ronald Reagan was a true believer. He didn't understand economics, and the simple notions of self-sufficiency and a pioneering spirit appealed to him. He asked, in essence, why would somebody want to regulate a business? Wouldn't it eventually always do what is best without regulation? What Reagan and his followers failed to understand was that business will not always do what's best for society. In fact, the fundamental goal of business, to maximize assets and profits while externalizing costs and liabilities, is often destructive to the public good. This becomes particularly obvious when business owners do not live or otherwise participate in the same society and culture as their customers. A small business owner can't run sewage out his door or pay his workers below a living wage because he has to face his next-door neighbor and his next-door neighbor's kid who may want to work in his shop. Same is not true, however, for multinational corporations. Executives of large corporations don't live in the same society as the people who work for them or who live next door to their factories. As a result, the legacy of unregulated big business and the concentration of wealth in the hands of the few, that legacy is pollution, worker exploitation, cuts to workers' safety, and the bestowing of profits to the company's elite while cutting benefits to the company's rank and file. This is the book Screwed.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and it's Anything Goes Summer. Let's pick up some phone calls here. I do have still a large pile of news, but we will work our way through it as the day continues. Greg in Brooklyn, New York. Hey, Greg, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Listen, I love your show, and I think you highlight a lot of important issues for the country. One area, though, that I'm a bit upset about is how you, from what I've seen, consistently mischaracterize libertarians, in my opinion. And it's unfortunate because they agree with progressives on so many policy issues that an alliance would help. For example, if libertarians and progressives voted as a bloc, Trump wouldn't have been elected, for example.
Okay, so let's just go through the probably the most clear explication of the Libertarian Party's values. The 2016 party platform was very, very wordy, but the 1980 Libertarian Party platform that David Koch ran for vice president on, it says essentially the exact same things, but in shorter sentences. So let me just go through some of these, and you can tell me how they're identical to liberal perspectives, okay?
May I?
Number one, we urge the repeal of federal campaign finance laws and the immediate abolition of the despotic Federal Election Commission. You think there should be no limits on the participation of billionaires or corporations in elections?
Well, I wanted to make a couple points.
That's fine. You made your point that you think libertarianism and liberalism have something in common. I want to go through some of these with you. Do you, liberals think that, the only thing that can stand up to the power of organized money is organized people, also known as government. Are you in disagreement with that or in agreement with it?
Well, can I just back up my point? I don't think the 1980 platform is the same as Bill Weld, for example, and Johnson.
It actually is. Bill Weld and Johnson were making the same points. They were just making, and Gary Johnson in particular, he's a very, very slick wordsmith. I've debated Gary Johnson. But at the end of the day, there's nothing in this list that these guys disagree with. I guarantee you. And in fact, I defy you to find any statement from them that disagrees with it. We favor the abolition of Medicare and Medicaid. This is the Libertarian Party position. It was their position in 2016. They ran on this.
Yes, I know. Can I give you an example? I'm a big fan of Bernie Sanders, who you just had on the show. Huge fan. He's been consistent for 30 years.
Then you're not a libertarian.
Well, I know that, but I'm also a fan of Ron Paul, who's been consistent for 30 years. They have principles, and they've worked together to audit the Fed. The reason they
Ron Paul's principles are whatever's good for rich people and white people is good for America.
Hold on. They were able to audit the Fed. You agree with that? I mean, they were teaming up.
What does that have to do with anything? That's not a policy prescription. I mean, yeah, there are Democrats, there's Republicans, there's conservatives, there's liberals. Sure. Everybody looks at the Fed and says that needs to be audited, just like the Pentagon needs to be audited. They're missing $2 trillion. They haven't had a successful audit since the 50s. But that has nothing to do with policy positions. The libertarians oppose Medicaid, Medicare, and frankly, and Social Security as well. We favor the deregulation of the medical insurance. We favor the repeal of the fraudulent, bankrupt, and increasingly oppressive Social Security system. Pending that repeal, participation in Social Security should be made voluntary. You're in support of that?
I think as a progressive, I would say the Social Security tax is very regressive because of the cap. It's the most regressive tax on the
But that's not what the libertarians are saying. What they're saying is do away with it. You're talking about improving it.
Why would you want to?
So, we favor the abolition of the governmental postal service. Do you want to do away with the postal service?
What I'm trying to tell you is they're both anti-war on all the social issues. You're a social libertarian, aren't you?
No.
You are a civil libertarian.
I am not a libertarian at all. Libertarianism is a phony religion. It was invented by a bunch of billionaires back in the 50s and 60s and 70s and came into national prominence in the 1980 election when when Charles Koch poured a lot of money into his brother's vice presidential campaign. And then Harry Brown did a great job of promoting it through the late 70s and the early 80s.
What about earlier people like Milton Friedman, for example?
Milton Friedman did not call himself a libertarian. He called himself a liberal.
Okay, so classical liberals.
He was using the European context. But my point is that when people call in and say, hey, you're anti-libertarian. Yes, I'm anti-libertarian. But when you try to say that libertarian and liberalism are the same, okay, we support repeal of all laws which impede the ability of any person to find employment, such as minimum wage laws. Are you opposed to the minimum wage?
Law, great example. Great example with the minimum wage law. If everyone had an unconditional basic income, or as Milton Friedman talked about, the negative tax, which is earned income credit, found its way into the Basically, if everyone had unconditional basic income like they do in Alaska.
Yeah, again, you're not defending a libertarian position. You're defending your own position. I get that. That's fine, but, you know, it's not the libertarian position. We support the abolition of the Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Energy. Do you want to do away with the EPA and go back to the days when America's cities, you could hardly breathe the air?
No, I don't. But I do want to let each individual make their own choices in the market, not just about their lifestyle and who they have sex with, but also the schools they go to, the doctors they see, and the money that they use, like in Bristol, where they have their own money. I think communities are stronger when the local community.
There's no law against having your own money. When I lived in Vermont, they had Green Mountain dollars, or Green Mountain hours, they called them, and each one was worth 1 hour of labor. But that, you know, that again has nothing to do with anything. The libertarians are in favor of destroying essentially our government. This is an anti-government party put together by billionaires to further the interests of billionaires. It's really, really that simple. We specifically, we demand a return of America's railroad system to private ownership. We advocate the abolition of the Federal Aviation Administration. We advocate the abolition of the Food and Drug Administration. We support an end to all subsidies for childbearing built into our present laws, including all welfare programs. We oppose all government welfare relief projects and aid to the poor programs. We call for the privatization of the inland waterways and the distribution system that brings water to industry, agriculture, and households. You want corporations to control the water supply coming into your house?
Most billionaires were formed because of government favors, like in Russia, for example, and here as well.
I don't disagree with that, but that's, again, a whole another. I mean, they're not calling for a repeal of the copyright, patent, and trademark laws that made Bill Clinton, that made Bill Gates a multi-billionaire, because it's a party that was created for billionaires. The Libertarian Party is all over property rights. That's the only right that they actually believe should exist in the United States, is property rights.
I hear you, but don't you think if we repealed the patent law, then innovations could come from all over the world and medicine wouldn't be so expensive here in America? Because that argument against single.
But the Libertarian Party wants to keep the patent laws.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
Libertarians.
Yes, they do. They call it. They call it. Absolutely, they do, Greg. Look it up. The libertarians consider intellectual property to be property.
Well, that's
and property is sacrosanct. It's more important even than humanity.
Intellectual property, most do not recognize. They do not recognize intellectual property as property.
Yeah. Well, okay.
I'm just telling you. I think there are many.
There are dueling facts here. Greg, you know, it's been a good conversation, but I want to let other people into the conversation here. Greg, thanks a lot for the call. Try again. Wayne in Chicago. Hey, Wayne, thanks for listening to WCBT. What's on your mind?
Wow. Hopefully you helped in deprogramming him. Hopefully.
We'll see.
Hopefully. Anyway, Tom, I want a continuation of our topic we had last week. You were asking me, well, Wayne, what are the different classes of the North Korean subs? Mm-hmm. And I have them, Tom.
By the way, you told me that they had like 50 or 60 subs, and I didn't believe it. And I think I said that on the air. I went and looked at it after we got off the air, and you were right.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. I should have known, Wayne. I should have known.
You should have known, Tom. It's Wayne.
Yeah, I know. I should never have douded you. I just figured, if North Korea actually had more subs than anybody else in the world, that everybody would know that. And I'm part of everybody, and I'm amazed that I was so dumb. I'm sorry. Anyhow, Wayne, back to you.
It's not a matter of being dumb. It's a matter of
uninformed.
The media over here, what do they report and what do they not report? That's really what it is.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
But, like they have like 20 Romeo-class subs, 1950s technology, Soviet diesel-electric propulsion. Mm-hmm. Now, they have their own domestic-made, they're called a Sang-O. Those are like midget subs. You can put special forces in there.
Right.
They use those mostly for deployment of mines, South Korean ports, harbors.
And isn't one of the big concerns that you could put a dirty bomb in one of those?
Yep. And then they have the Yono class, which is a midget sub. It can carry a crew of like 6 to 7, like 9 people. And now here's my point, Tom. The Nazis came all the way from Germany and from Spain, all the way to South America and Antarctica with 1930s, 1940s submarine technology.
Oh, Wayne, they came off the coast of New York City. It's just that and in fact, we blew up a couple of them, and we captured another one. It's just that FDR ordered the news about that to be suppressed. So you find it in history books, but most people don't even know that there were Nazi subs off the coast of the United States in 1943.
Exactly. So, my point, Tom, is if the Nazis could use that 30s and 40s technology, what makes people think that the Koreans couldn't stay underwater? Because the Nazis could stay underwater for up to 2 months at a time.
Right.
So what makes people think that the North Koreans can't stay underwater long enough to get off the shore of California, L.A. in particular, and launch a SLBM, submarine launched ballistic missile, at Los Angeles?
Right.
So that's what I'm saying. We absolutely cannot attack North Korea.
Yeah. Yeah, no, not to mention what they would do to South Korea if we attacked them. I agree with you, and I think that the only path here is a diplomatic one, and I think that the Trump administration is destroying the possibility of that with all this tough talk rhetoric.
Right. And look, Tom, like I told you the last week, their subs go undetected once they're submerged, especially those midget subs.
Right.
So look how easy it would be if they're on a suicide mission to sneak up anywhere on our coast and launch an SLBM.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something to take very, very seriously. Wayne, thanks for the call. Thanks for educating me. I appreciate it. It's always great talking to you. Thank you, Wayne. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls and Anything Goes Summer right after this. Welcome back. Dirk in Eaton, Indiana. Hey, Dirk, what's on your mind? Thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, Tom. I've called a few times before. The one thing I really was sitting up in my chair about is I was watching the Senate, and, of course, Mitch McConnell.
You're talking about the hearings for Christopher Wray?
No, he was complaining about the Democratic obstruction of people nominated by our president.
Really?
He said it would take 11 years at this rate to get everybody in that we need.
Well, that's because they've been blocking people for 8 years.
Well, I understand that, but I don't understand why the Democrats don't sit up and make that point.
I'm guessing that they have
after McConnell and said, hello,
yeah.
What'd you do for 6 years?
I'm guessing they have and they are, and it's not being covered by the news. I get these.
I'm watching C-SPAN. I don't know why they don't just get up in Senate. I mean, they're allowed to talk, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's time for.
You could rebut somebody else's.
I agree. It's time for serious political theater.
Right. I mean, they have to get up and call him out. Say, no, wait a minute. What'd you do for 6 years when Obama was president?
Right. Right.
It doesn't make any sense.
Around this, around their so-called health care bill, their giant tax cut for billionaires, around their climate change policies, around the increasing corruption, where you've got lobbyists now running regulatory agencies that regulate the industries that the lobbyists used to represent. I mean, this is nearly 30 people in the Trump administration so far that have clear conflicts of interest like this.
Well, no, but the problem I have is I don't hear the Democrats, even on the floor of the Senate,
raising hell about it
and say something.
Yeah.
As soon as they make those statements, have somebody get up and say, "Hey, now wait a minute." And if you watched McConnell make that speech, he had it almost looked like a little Cheshire Cat smile, that he knew what he had done before, and he didn't care.
Right.
And that's the problem.
Yeah, and he knew that Fox News wasn't going to point it out, and thus the Republican base would never even know.
Well, you won't see any of that on any of the major networks.
Yeah.
It's only on C-SPAN, and not everybody has access to that. So.
Yeah. Good point, Dirk. So You know, it seems like the last Democrat who was really doing good political theater was Alan Grayson. And, you know, with his, the new Republican health care plan is, number one, don't get sick. Number two, if you do get sick, die quickly. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that, yes.
I'm assuming that what you're calling for is a return to that kind of political theater.
Well, we have to start making statements. I mean, there has to be another view pointed out, or how hypocritical the speeches are and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense just to sit there and listen to the guy talk and then not rebuttal.
Yeah.
I mean, I was taught in school that was what the process of political discussion was.
Yeah, that's why it's called dialogue.
Make a statement, you give your statement, and then you talk it out and say what's wrong with each other's statement. Nobody ever does that anymore.
Yeah. Well, by and large, I mean, you know, McConnell is the guy who's running the Senate as if there were no Democrats in it. So it's like, this is, and has been, by the way, for 8 years. Dirk, good points all. Thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Dion in Round Lake, Illinois. Hey, Dion, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I'm in agreement with the Republicans that college is not essentially a requirement today, or it's almost essentially worthless, because I think there's better alternatives like learning a trade, online learning, Coursera.org, and I think it's overpriced today, too, than what our grandparents paid, and I think it should be free.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. The question that was asked of Republicans is, and I'm paraphrasing from memory, but it's pretty close, is do you think the influence of college has been a net positive or negative one on society? And so it isn't, do you think everybody should go to college? It's, do you think college is a good thing or a bad thing for American culture? And 56% of Republicans over the last decade said it's a good thing. And roughly 65, 68% of Democrats said it's a good thing. In this most recent survey that was done this year that covers the last 2 years, what they found was that the Republican support went from 56% down to 36 or 38%, and Democratic support went from 60-something percent, 68% as I recall, to around 73%. So Democrats increasingly think that having a college in the community or in the state or in the nation is a good thing for the country. Whereas the majority of Republicans now think that having a college, any college in the United States, the college is a net bad influence. I think this is the result of, on the one hand, the petro-billionaires, the Koch network, and the entire Republican Party denying climate science, saying, oh, you can't trust scientists, you can't believe scientists. And, of course, colleges are infested. They're nests filled with scientists. So you've got that. And then you've got also the religious right, and over 1 million children in the United States homeschooling and being taught that there's no such thing as evolution, or that there is you know, some of the more bizarre theories, the eugenics theories, the racial hierarchy theories, all this kind of stuff, white supremacism. I mean, a lot of the stuff is being taught to homeschooling kids and right-wing kids. And they believe that there's no such thing as evolution. And so, therefore, science is terrible. And, again, colleges are, you know, vipers' nests of scientists. I think that's what's going on.
I think it is because the education and continuing self-education, but at what cost? Becoming an indentured servant?
Yeah, no, I agree with you that it's insane that anybody goes into debt to go to college. And I agree with you that probably the majority of Americans don't need to go to college and shouldn't go to college. We do need to have trade schools. We used to have, these programs used to be run by unions. They were called apprenticeship programs. A couple of my brothers have been through a couple of these apprenticeship programs. They're really solid things that lead to great careers that'll last for the rest of your life, at least as long as the United States has trade policy that keeps industrial processes, manufacturing here in the United States. But we've gone from a quarter of our economy being industrial manufacturing to 11%. And no country has ever successfully sustained itself more than a half a century with less than 15% manufacturing. That's the point at which a country really starts to fundamentally change. And that's what's happened here. Our economy is being financialized and hollowed out by the banksters and people trying to make a quick buck. And you know, the wealth of our nation, which is manufactured goods, has been evaporating. Dion, I got to move along. Thank you for your call. George in Brookfield, Connecticut. Hey, George, what's on your mind? Thanks for listening to Sirius XM.
Hi, Tom. Love your show.
Thanks.
And I was really excited to hear you talk about Smedley Butler the other day. I've written a screenplay about him because I think more people know about. Yeah.
About the attempted coup?
Yes. It's kind of, it goes back and forth from around 9/11, about a kid who's going to join the Marines to avenge his father. He lost his father on 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes back in time and meets Smedley Butler and witnesses the business coup.
That sounds fascinating.
I think it is. Nobody else seems to. But,
have you finished it? Have you written the whole thing, George?
Yeah, it's finished, yeah. It's been around for about a year or two.
Wow. Well, I wish you the very best with it. It's you know, getting a screenplay turned into a play or into a movie or a documentary or anything, I can tell you from personal experience, is a really hard thing to do.
Yeah, I know that.
But yeah, I wish you the best.
Thank you. If I could just make one small, you had everything pretty much right. If I could just make one small correction.
Sure.
When the businessmen were recruiting Butler, they didn't want him to lead the 500,000. They needed him to recruit the 500,000 veterans. And a lot of the businessmen wanted MacArthur because he was one of them and they knew him and trusted him. But
that's interesting.
Hated MacArthur.
I thought they already had the Liberty League, the right-wing veterans organization, on their side, and that was the 500,000 people.
Yeah, the Liberty League was in effect, but that was just the top dogs. That was just the businessmen, and they needed Butler to recruit the 500,000 veterans, and he could have done it because they loved him so much.
Yeah, yeah, he was the Dwight Eisenhower of his day. I mean, we haven't had a quote good war since then, so we haven't had a good warrior in quotes. Like Eisenhower won World War II, and so he was thought of well. I don't think that we've had a general. I can't think of one, who has achieved that kind of stature. They've all been politicized, unfortunately.
Right. The only current one, he doesn't have anywhere near Smedley Butler's. People know of him is Andrew Bacevich, who I think is a pretty good guy.
Yeah, I don't know him or anything about him. But you look at McChrystal, you look at a lot of these guys who've made their chops in Iraq and Afghanistan, and say what? Oh yeah, David Petraeus and Stormin Norman and all these guys. Yeah, but I think it's just like in Vietnam. I mean, the guys who were let's. Well, that was Kissinger actually, wasn't it? Let's nuke North Vietnam. Or Nixon. I mean, Nixon and Kissinger were discussing that. But anyway, thank you, George. Thanks for setting me straight on that. I appreciate it. It's great having the smartest listeners on all of radio. I got to tell you, and TV for that matter. George, thanks for listening to us on Sirius XM Progress 127. We'll be back in just a minute. We're going to be checking in with Dr. Rosalind Layton, visiting researcher at the Center for Communication and Media Studies, about the Internet. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Our book today is Walking Your Blues Away, How to Heal the Mind and Create Emotional Well-Being. And we're reading starting on page 2 in the introduction. The human body is a self-healing organism. When you cut your finger, it heals. If you break your leg, it heals. Even if part of you is cut out in surgery, the surgeon's wound heals. We heal from bacterial and viral invasions, from injuries, from all variety of traumas. The mechanisms of healing are built into us. 5 million years of evolution or the grace of God or both have made our bodies automatic healing machines. So why wouldn't the same be true of our minds and our emotions? All of the traumas that we experience in life leave their wounds. If humankind hadn't had ways of healing from those emotional and psychological blows, over time society would have become progressively less functional. Instead, history shows us that people usually recover from even the most severe psychological wounds, often learning great lessons or gaining important insights in the recovery process. The famous Kauai, Hawaii longitudinal study of children raised in stressful, disadvantaged conditions, they were migrant farm workers, found that a higher percentage of the children grew up to be highly resilient than did a middle-class control group. The generation that survived the Great Depression and the Nazi Holocaust in Europe went on to create important social institutions, build nations, and offer comfort and hope to humankind. Elie Wiesel's experience specifically comes to mind, although he never would have wished on another the horrific experience of being in one of Hitler's death camps. Through his writing of that experience, he has given a particularly inspiring model of resilience and healing to the world. The reality is that although adversity breaks some people, it strengthens others. And when people heal from adversity, the old cliche of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger usually rings true. But just as with the production of scar tissue in the healing of a wound to the skin, a process involving millions of cells producing very specific compounds in response to the trauma in the tissue, there must be an inborn mechanism for healing the mind and the emotions. And just as healing from a cut can be speeded up by keeping the wound dry, or can be slowed down by letting the wound get wet or dirty and irritated, this emotional healing is also a process that can be either stimulated or thwarted by our interventions. In this book, I've identified a specific healing mechanism and process that nature has built into the human mind and body that enables us to process trauma in a way that is quick, functional, and permanent. Just like the skin's mechanism for forming scabs and scars and eventually even making the scars vanish, this mechanism is simple, fundamental, and elegant. In its simplest form, this mechanism involves rhythmic side-to-side stimulation of the body. This side-to-side motion, or bilateral motion, causes nerve impulses to cross the brain from the left hemisphere to the right hemisphere and back at a specific rate or frequency. This cross-patterning produces an organic integration of left hemispheric thinking functions with right hemisphere and brainstem feeling functions. This integration is a necessary precursor to emotional and intellectual healing from trauma. This steady movement of nerve impulses across the hemispheres of the brain is stimulated by the bilateral movement processes of a variety of modern forms of psychotherapy, such as eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, also known as EMDR, emotional freedom technique, and thought field therapy. In its purest form, however, I've discovered that the natural and rhythmic left-right process of walking while performing a simple mental exercise can also stimulate this same internal integration process. This, I posit, is the way humans have healed themselves for trauma for the hundreds of thousands of years of human history. And it's only because so few of us walk anymore that we have to resort to office-based psychotherapeutic processes to produce a similar result. And that result is impressive. When we stimulate the nervous system in this bilateral manner while calling to mind a persistent emotional distress, the emotional charge associated with that memory quickly and permanently dissipates. This isn't a process of producing amnesia or forgetting. Instead, it's a way of reframing the past, a way of re-understanding or putting into context what has been so unnerving to us. When we perform this bilateral process correctly, the pictures of painful past events in our memory transforms from stark, scary, sound-filled color movies into black and white still pictures that are flattened out and lose their sound. The internal dialogue we have about the events, the tagline that we tell ourselves, and actually hear in our own heads and in our own voices, changes. Usually from something like, that was a painful experience that still scares me, or I was victimized in that relationship, to a more productive synopsis, such as, yes, that happened to me, but it's well in the past now, and I've learned some good lessons from the experience. I can now let go of it. Inciting the movement of nerve impulses across the brain's hemispheres helps people come to terms with their past. They stop being frightened by their imagined futures and feel comfortable and empowered in the present. Walking while holding a traumatic memory in mind in a particular way can produce this result in a very short time. And the book goes on to talk about how exactly to use simple walking, just going out for a 20-minute walk, which is physically good for you. Use that simple walking and combine it with a very specific set of mental exercises that Sigmund Freud and Franz Anton Mesmer and others first discovered years ago. Walking your blues away.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is Dr. Rosalind Layton. Rosalind Layton is a visiting fellow with the Center for Internet Communications and Technology Policy at the right-leaning American Enterprise Institute. AEI.org is the website. Dr. Layton, welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Today there's this day of action on net neutrality, and I understand you and the American Enterprise Institute are speaking out on behalf of the giant telco companies that want to be able to slice and dice the internet and basically, in my opinion, screw us all. And I'm wondering what kind of argument can you possibly make that Comcast should be able to look into my traffic and say, oh, he's going and looking at news sites, we're going to charge him X. Or, oh, he's streaming video, we're going to charge him Y. And I'm not talking about the volume of data. We already bill based on volume, and I have no problem with that. But, what we've done with telephone service is we've said this is a utility. And the phone company cannot listen into my phone conversation and say, oh, he's talking to his mom, we'll just charge him a penny a minute for that. Oh, he's talking to his boss, he's negotiating a raise, let's charge him 20 cents a minute for that. Why should internet companies be able to do that?
Well, first, Tom, it's really I love your show. It's just an honor to be here and speak with you. And there's a lot to unpack there, but let me just give first things first. I speak for myself. I am with the American Enterprise Institute, and personally, for most of my work in this issue, I have been working in Copenhagen with the university funded through the Danish government. So my research really reflects what I have learned in looking at this issue in over 50 countries around the world. So what I think is what's important to note here is that there's no one here who's against a free and open internet. I think
yes, there is.
Well, I'm not.
Comcast has got 3 active lawsuits against our government right now to try and shut down the free and open internet.
Well, so first of all, I think we
and they're supported by the American Enterprise Institute.
Okay, it's not actually true. What I understand the free and open internet to be, and maybe different people have different definitions about that. The debate here is really about the legal instrument that we use. And my research of over 50 countries now that have these rules, they have made these rules through Congress, through legislation and the will of the people. And the concern here is that the approach taken by the FCC in 2015 was using a particular legal instrument which allows the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, the ability to set prices, to discriminate traffic, in fact, the ability to prioritize some things over the other, and the ability to add taxes to unbundle networks and so on. So I think that you're right, as you say with your book. We all have the same objective. We all want to make things better, but we have different ways that we want to get there. I want to see this enshrined in Congress the way most of the world's countries do. I'm really concerned about empowering 5 unelected officials with the ability to control our communications network.
Well, here's the problem that we have, Dr. Layton. We have a Congress that, thanks to the United States Supreme Court, with decisions from Buckley versus Vallejo to First National Bank versus Bellotti to Citizens United to McCutcheon, that has basically turned control of our legislative process over to a small group of very, very wealthy people and very large corporations. And those folks are writing the legislation to benefit themselves. As I'm sure you know, net neutrality is overwhelmingly popular in the United States. And having corporations like Comcast and Time Warner and AT&T slice and dice the internet and then charge us for the bits and pieces, is not popular with the American people. And I still haven't heard an answer to my question. How is it a good thing for us that Comcast, my internet service provider, can start legally looking into every single thing I'm doing on the internet and charge me different prices based on that? Because that is explicitly the business model that these cable TV companies, particularly Comcast, which also owns NBC and MSNBC, are trying to promote.
Okay, so I want to make sure I get to your actual question. What you're talking about is an ISP looking in, I think what you mean is with DPAC and inspection?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So that is something that is it's not the same issue, and maybe we have different understandings about what this is about. That is the issue of DPAC and inspection is not what the particular problem that's defined here, as I understand.
Okay, well, let's just set that aside then and just say, particular IP addresses or particular websites. When cable was evolving, the original sales pitch was, we're going to give you hundreds of channels. It's going to be a wonderful thing. Just give us public rights of way, and let us use the public, all this public infrastructure, and we'll bring cable to your home. And then once they had essentially a monopoly, it was like, oh, you want MSNBC? That's an extra $5 a month. Oh, you want HBO? That's an extra $10 a month. Whatever. I mean, and it wasn't just obviously the cable companies. They were collaborating with companies that were making money on this. But the slicing and dicing of cable TV has caused the United States to have among the highest cable TV prices in the world, in some cases by an order of magnitude. And these same companies want to do the same thing to the internet. And I don't understand how anybody could defend that.
Okay, so we've got two issues here. You've got cable TV pricing and broadband pricing. So, cable TV pricing is a whole ball of wax that you also have to look at the amount of content and the amount of channels and so forth and so on. That's one discussion. But here's the other issue with broadband, and I'm going to give you a consumer perspective because, here's what my concern about this is you're trying to say, you're making a rule that you have to have a flat rate internet service, you need to contact to all endpoints, and that's good for the consumer. Me as the consumer, you're actually making me pay for content that I don't want and that I'm never going to see. So, for example, YouTube and Netflix, they take up more than 50% of the traffic on the internet. I actually never subscribe to Netflix. I don't really watch YouTube. So I'm actually paying more for content I'm never going to see. This is really an issue when you get into adult material, which is actually quite a large part of the internet for people who have moral or religious or different concerns. They're unwittingly subsidizing the delivery of content that they have objections to. So what I would say is, why are we denying the consumer the ability to say, hey, I would like to have some things for free. I'd like to have some things that I pay for. I would like it, you content company, I would like you to deliver it to me, and it's okay if you give me advertising. So that's what this is the trade-off here.
The answer to your question, Dr. Layton, is very simple. The reason why you should pay for that traffic is because it's a public good. The argument that you're making is virtually identical to the argument that conservatives, particularly in Virginia from 1957 until 1961, were making when they shut down public schools in Prince Edward County so that black people couldn't go to school, which was, I don't have kids in school. I didn't produce, or my kids are grown up. Why should I pay property taxes for public schools? Why should we even have public schools? I don't need them. Well, the bottom line is that all of society is benefited by having an educated society. Right. Similarly, all of society is benefited by having a wide open library. The internet is now the public, it's the library of the world. Well, and you know, we don't say, oh, we're not going to have a public library just because your kids don't use it.
Mr. Hartmann, empirically, we know that the majority of the traffic of the internet is entertainment. We all have different concepts of what entertainment should be. The most socially valuable part of the internet is less than 1%. It is such small amounts of data. It's health information. It is information around, the bus schedule. It's communicating to your relatives, SMS, extremely small, discrete amount of data. I'm personally willing to advocate that we make some parts of public good, make it absolutely free. All government websites, for example, healthcare.gov, everything related to health.
But you are still trusting these giant monopolistic corporations to tell you what you can and cannot watch at what price and speed.
I studied the data myself. I know that when you make me have the only choice I have to pay is one price for the whole thing, I'm paying for stuff that I don't need.
You know, the United Nations and Canada have both declared the internet to be a human right.
We should be enabling for the poorest people of the world the most valuable information. And the good news is that it's actually a small amount of data. It would not be hard to, make that essentially free for everyone. And why shouldn't, if you have a different concept?
Well, that's, taking this back to the public school argument, this is what you're saying is, well, you shouldn't worry about the fact that there's no public schools. You can always homeschool your kids. Those books are not all that expensive. In fact, you can check them out at the library for free.
Well, and actually, let's talk about public schools. We can actually enable online education quite easily with a very small amount of data. We can do it on low-speed networks because the design and the technology is there.
Online education is, A, it's a completely different topic, but B, if it becomes popular, then Comcast will say, oh, look at that, they want to homeschool their kids. They try to avoid $5,000 a year or $10,000 a year in school tuition. Let's charge them $5,000 a year for the homeschool information.
Let's say Comcast does that, okay? I would highly doubt that they would. We have today
Why give them the power to
stop them to do it? Because, well, first of all, we have layers of laws.
Dr. Layton, Comcast screws us all regularly. Go to Europe and look at the.
I live in Europe.
Okay? Yeah, okay, then you know. If you look at the cable systems there, they're using literally 21st century technology.
No.
If you've got a Comcast cable box, you're using systems that were developed in the 90s.
The internet connections in Europe are delivered over DSL. Okay, they have half the rate of fiber to the home than we do. So that's not actually true.
Well, it depends on how you define Europe. If you want to talk about Western Europe or Northern Europe, it's a whole completely different story than if you're going to include all the old former Soviet states.
Right. Well, and fine. And we can go country by country. But when you want to talk about the European Union, two-thirds...
Well, let's talk about France.
Okay, France is a great example. This is a case where they've wanted to have subsidies to have fiber to the home, and that's been the national policy. Unfortunately, they have a lower rate of fiber. They have one of the lowest rates of fiber because it has turned out to be very expensive, and they keep trying to do it.
It's not about who's got the fiber and who does. In France, as the New York Times pointed out last year, in France, for $30 a month, you get 100 MIPS down, 50 MIPS up. You get cell phone service in over 30 countries, and you get over 200 channels of television. I mean, it's a fraction of the cost here. And the main reason actually is because they've got the law that whoever owns the copper going into the house has to rent that copper to any ISP. There's over 100 ISPs in France.
Well, because you know why? That is not the real.
It's because they encourage competition.
Hey, that is not true. You can go to rural parts of France. There is next to no broadband connection. I'm sorry. Talk to your friends who spend the summer in France. They'll tell you it's a disaster.
Well, I spent part of the summer in France, actually, including rural.
Maybe you're lucky enough to be in that place. But
yeah.
That is,
okay. Dr. Layton, we're not going to resolve this, I don't think, today, but thank you for dropping by.
Thank you. I hope we can get Congress to resolve it.
Okay, Dr. Rosalind Layton, AEI.org. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be back with your calls, my thoughts, and the news of the day right after this. And welcome back. Doug in Fort Collins, Colorado. Hey, Doug, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's up?
Oh, my pleasure, and thanks again for all you do. I was making calls to the FCC today to tell them I support Title II and not to change it. And I found making my point that when I was talking to Republicans, I told them this. I said, Comcast owns NBC, and they're my service provider. Would you like it if I could watch MSNBC and have it stream really good, broadband speed? But if I want to watch Fox News, it would come through like dial-up? Would they want to support something like that?
Right.
So no matter what side of the issue you're on, there's always somebody who's going to get cut out. And like the lady you were talking to, like, I don't think I should have to pay for people to surf porn or whatever her argument was.
Right.
It's the same argument they make with taxes. Why should I pay taxes and stuff like that, like you said, for the schools?
Right.
And we don't realize we're a common society. We all pay for everybody else, and they all pay for us.
Right.
So I just say keep it equal. We can't be discriminating on information.
Well, and I hope Congress can fix this, is a way of saying, blow out the FCC, do away with the Title II regulations, and let's turn this thing over to the big corporations. Congress right now is controlled by the big corporations. Page and Gillens did this study out of, I think it was Northwestern University, might have been Columbia, 2 years ago, where they found that if you're in the top 10% of Americans, the probabilities of legislation getting passed that you want is like 60, 70%. If you're in the top 1%, the probabilities are like 80, 90%. If you're in the bottom 90% of Americans economically, the probability of Congress passing legislation that you are in favor of is equal to random noise. It is unmeasurable. There is no measurable association between what the public wants. For example, only 12% of the public wants the Republican health care bill, and what Congress votes on. And that's something that everybody should know about. As I was trying to say to Dr. Layton, as Jimmy Carter said on this program, we're no longer a democracy, we're an oligarchy. And she's arguing for the oligarchs to make the laws. And I'm wary of that. I think that Title II works just fine.
I try to turn my white noise up as loud as possible. I've called my senator twice a day for like the last 2 months, telling him what I think about health care. Asking more about his town halls. So the best I can do is make a lot of noise. It might be white noise, but they are definitely going to get tired of hearing from me.
Have you been successful in getting through to Cory Gardner's office?
Yeah, a few times.
You're calling local offices?
Yeah. What surprised me is when I call his D.C. office first, and I give him my SKU.
Right.
Sometimes it'll automatically bump back to my local office. I'm like, I just spoke with you a minute ago.
Huh.
And I realized that both the local office and the D.C. office go to one place.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. He's like, she explained, oh, well, they're busy there, and they just route their calls back.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I want to talk to somebody in D.C. I want to talk to as many people as I can.
Right.
Pester them is really what I'm doing.
Yeah, because what I've been finding and what people have been reporting to us on this program is that if you try to call the D.C. office of pretty much any elected Republican right now, you don't get through. You get voicemail. And if you try to sign up for a city hall, for a town hall rather, with any of these Republican members of Congress, House or Senate, they're not doing them. And at the only, like Paul Ryan, the only thing he's doing is the so-called phone town halls, where he gets to pick what questions to answer. Nobody can say anything because everybody's phone is muted, and he gets to pontificate. And it's bizarre. Anyhow, Doug, good on you for being a citizen lobbyist. And thanks for the call. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back.
Hi there, I'm Marie with Free Speech TV. Your support, whether through giving donations, volunteering, or spreading the word about Free Speech TV, has made it possible for the only independent progressive news network to exist. And for that, I want to say thank you. Now you can give to the network powered by the people by donating an unwanted or used vehicle through our Vehicles of Change program. If you have an old car, RV, or even a motorcycle, Free Speech TV can use it to grow and thrive. You can make a bigger difference in supporting Free Speech TV by giving an old car. It's a great way to support the network without having to dig into your bank account. Just call 877-378-8669 and ask for more information about Vehicles of Change. Again, the number to call is 877-378-8669. If it has a VIN, we'll take it in. Thank you.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Dwayne in London, England, watching us on YouTube. Hey, Dwayne, what's on your mind today?
Good afternoon or good morning, Tom. You've got an excellent show, and I just was compelled to call you today.
Thank you.
I was listening to the doctor that you had on earlier, who was saying that they're not interested necessarily in deep packet inspection. I should point out, first of all, that I've worked all over America and I've worked all over Europe, and I know about the net neutrality issue because I've been an expert in building internet networks for all of the major providers around the world, and I've worked for cellular operators. So I'm familiar with this very, very much.
Okay.
Now, here is...
What am I missing?
Sorry?
What am I missing, Dwayne?
You're not missing anything. The trick here is that, as you can see, Comcast have been buying up content providers in the sense that you and I know them as NBC or various television broadcasters. A lot of the younger people and the next generation coming through don't watch television in the way that you and I may do, as in sitting down in front of the TV of an evening. They watch TV on the go. So they'll watch it on their iPhones, they'll watch it on their tablets, and the way they get their content is over the internet. And the way that the cable companies or telecommunications companies, what they want to do, as you've seen in Europe, the British Telecom has now got effectively a cable service. And you see in Germany, Deutsche Telekom, and in America, you've got a Comcast and AT. What they've started to do is buy up content. In that means to you and me, television shows, movies, etc.,
right.
etc.
And they're doing that so that they can favor that content, presumably, when when they blow up net neutrality.
Exactly. So what they want to do is effectively say, oh, well, because you're on Comcast, we will allow you to watch NBC and Ultra HD television, but if you're not, you can't watch it on Ultra HD television coming over the internet or your phone or your cellular phone. They want to also, if you look at what they've been doing, they've been spending huge amounts of money on buying up the rights to broadcast, sports broadcasting rights, so that they can force their customers or give preferential treatment to their customers to watch that content. That's what's behind this move with killing off net neutrality. They want to be able to prefer their own content over anybody else's coming over the internet. The cable argument is a red herring. It's got nothing to do with it.
I agree.
It's about the traffic that comes over the internet. And the only way, there's two ways to do that. They either look at what traffic, what IP addresses are going from point A to point B, or they look with deep packet inspection tools, as you mentioned to her, and they look at it that way, which is an invasion of privacy in anybody's language.
Yep.
And that's what's behind this. And then they also want to sell you this service on your cellular phone. So if you're on a certain cellular provider, you can get the content. You can watch the Super Bowl, or you can watch the the soccer or something like that. That's what's behind it. It's about money.
Yep.
That's fundamentally what these guys are trying to do, is to tear up the net neutrality so they can basically hog more money off people.
Yeah, I got it.
More money.
Dwayne, spot on. I'm sorry we're hitting a hard break here, but thank you so much, Dwayne.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of your calls, my thoughts, and the news of the day right after this. Hi, for the Thom Hartmann University Book Club today, we're reading from The Crash of 2016, which might happen in early 2017. We'll see, but it's coming. This is from Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is titled Reagan Kidnapped the Jetsons. In a 1966 article, Time magazine looked toward the future and what the rise of automation would mean for average working Americans. It concluded, quote, by 2000, the machines will be producing so much that everyone in the U.S. will, in effect, be independently wealthy. With government benefits, even non-working families will have, by one estimate, an annual income of $30,000 to $40,000. How to use leisure meaningfully will be a major problem. End of quote. And that was $30,000 to $40,000 in 1966 dollars, which would roughly be $199,000 to $260,000 in 2010 dollars.
Ask anybody who was a teenager or older in the 1960s. This was a big sales pitch for automation and the coming computer age. There was even a cartoon show about it, The Jetsons. And everybody looked forward to the day when increased productivity from robots, computers, and automation would translate into fewer hours worked or more pay or both for every American worker. And there was good logic behind the idea. The premise was simple. With better technology, companies would become more efficient. They'd be able to make more things in less time. Revenues would skyrocket, and Americans would bring home higher and higher paychecks, all the while working fewer and fewer hours. So by the year 2000, according to Time magazine in 1966, we would enter what was then referred to as the leisure society. Futurists speculated that the biggest problem facing America in that Jetsons future of the year 2000 would be just how the heck everyone would use all their extra leisure time. And of course, there were also those who worried about what kind of degeneracy would emerge when a nation has lots of money and free time on its hands. Neither happened, and it didn't happen because Ronald Reagan stole the leisure society from us and handed it over to the economic royalists. In 1981, the royalists went right to work, taking down that first pillar on which FDR rebuilt the American middle class, progressive taxation. Taking advantage of the oil shock crisis, neoliberal shock troopers immediately ushered through a revolutionary change in the tax code with the Economic Recovery Act of 1981. The first major piece of legislation signed by Reagan has slashed the top marginal income tax rate from 70% to 50%, cutting estate taxes for wealthy businesses and slashing capital gains and corporate profit taxes. Reagan succeeded a few years later in dropping the top income tax rate even more to 28%, where it hadn't been since the Great Depression. It was the second largest tax cut in history, and it was nearly identical to the largest tax cut ever. Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon's in the 1920s, the one that created the bubble known as the Roaring Twenties, which eventually burst in 1929. The great forgetting had certainly arrived. The economic mistakes of the 1920s were coming back around. And again, the influx of all this hot money in the market, coupled with a robust deregulation agenda throughout the 1980s and 90s, would trigger a series of painful financial panics. The reason why the leisure society could be imagined by Time magazine is because ever since 1900, working people's wages tracked evenly with working people's productivity. So as productivity continued to rise, which was likely due to increased automation and better technology, so too would everyone's wages. And the glue holding this logic together was the current top marginal income tax rate. In 1966, when the Time article was written, the top marginal income tax rate was 70%. And what that effectively did was encourage CEOs to keep more money in their businesses and invest in new technology, to pay their workers more, to hire new workers and expand. After all, what's the point of sucking millions and millions of dollars out of your business if it's going to be taxed at 70%? According to this line of reasoning, if businesses were to suddenly become more profitable and efficient thanks to automation, then that money would flow throughout the businesses, raising everyone's standard of living, increasing everyone's leisure time. But when Reagan dropped that top tax rate down to 28%, everything changed, as you can see in this graph. Now, as businesses became more profitable, there was a far greater incentive for CEOs to pull those profits out of the company and pocket them because they were suddenly paying an incredibly low tax rate. And that's exactly what they did. All those new profits, thanks to automation, that were supposed to go to everyone, giving us all higher paychecks and more time off, instead went to the top, to the economic royalists. Suddenly, the symmetry in the productivity wages chart broke down. Productivity continued increasing because technology continued improving, but wages stayed flat. And again, since higher and higher profits could be sucked out of the company and taxed at lower and lower levels, there was no incentive to reduce the number of hours everyone worked. In the 1950s, before that Time magazine article predicted the leisure society, before that article was written, the average American working in manufacturing put in about 42 hours of work a week. Today, the average American working in manufacturing puts in about 40 hours a week. This means that despite the fact that productivity has increased 400% since 1950, Americans are working on average only 2 fewer hours a week. If productivity is 4 times higher than in 1950, then Americans should be able to work 4 times less, or just 10 hours a week, to afford the same 1950s lifestyle when a family of 4 could get by on just 1 paycheck, own a home, own a car, put their kids through school, take a vacation every now and then, and retire comfortably. But all that was wiped out by Reaganomics and Ronald Reagan. And that's just the beginning of the setup for the crash of 2016.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights. You can support the Thom Hartmann Program and see video of our entire 3-hour show over at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann.
That's amazing. There's an article in venturebeat.com from 2014 that somebody tweeted, as I recall. Let me get over and just see if this, did I get this off Twitter? Yeah, P. Duffy tweeted this to me, and I thought I might have seen it in our chat room. It wouldn't surprise me if it's there too. But this What France Has Taught Me article is amazing. It's by Chris O'Brien. And he says, our family moved to Toulouse, France in late August after living in the San Francisco Bay Area for 15 years. And he's talking about when he was in San Francisco. He says, we subscribed to Comcast broadband, which gave us 25 MIPS download speed for $85 a month. We didn't have cable or a home telephone. For mobile, we had 2 iPhones on AT&T's network for $144 a month. We had 450 minutes of calling time, not including nights and weekends. My wife's phone had 2 gigs of data each month, while mine had a grandfathered unlimited plan. And he goes through all this. So roughly, he's paying $229 a month for telecom. He says, now we live in the city center of Toulouse, France, in an apartment where I'm a broadband customer of a company called Numericable. Here's what I get for $63 a month. 100 MIP download speed, 250 cable channels, a home telephone with unlimited international calling, and a mobile phone that includes unlimited minutes and 3 gigs of data usage each month. He says, separately, I'm getting ready to sign my wife up for the $20 a month mobile plan with mobile provider free that comes with unlimited calling and 3 gigs of data. So our telecom costs here in France are $83 a month, about 1/3 of the cost of the United States for services that are astronomically superior. Trust me when I say you don't know how truly awful things are in the United States when it comes to broadband and wireless until you leave. Not only have I experienced this, but I was reminded of it again with this story in the New York Times, why the U.S. has fallen behind in internet speed and affordability. And that talked about a study, the cost of connectivity. And then he makes this statement, and this is absolutely brilliant. He says, government has played a strong, this is my big lesson from living in France. He says, government has played a strong role in ensuring competition. And that competition has increased choice and driven down prices for consumers. And he says, go ahead, America, read that last sentence a few times. I know it probably makes your head hurt. And it's just, you know, he says, unfortunately, a gullible American public has swallowed whole the idea that either you believe in government regulation or you believe in free markets. And the government intervention is the enemy of innovation and competition. Actually, it's the opposite. Government has played a strong role in ensuring competition, and that increases choice and drives down prices. So anyhow, just an FYI. Kitty in Boca Raton, Florida. Hey, Kitty, thanks for listening to us on Sirius. What's up?
I just want to say first, cheers to the gentleman in England for his insight and information, because after all, this is what it's about. It's about the free flow of information for all of humanity. So I really much appreciate his insight on that. And second, I want to say that interview made me sick. It made me sick to my stomach, because there is no defense of what the doctor's trying to do. It is just for money. And the thing is, I just watched the other night this show on Vice about how superior everybody else has it, just exactly what you were just saying, how Americans, our tax dollars, have helped create this whole internet, and we have one of the slowest and the most expensive. So we're not number one. We're the number one suckers.
Yeah.
We get to pay more for crappier service.
Yep, for internet and for healthcare. Yep. And for banking.
Yep. And that's why it starts to build on you as a person in this country, because you're like, wait a second, I work really hard and I make okay money, but I pay a lot of money in taxes. What are my taxes going towards to help start these things? America is a wonderful country for innovation. And I mean, am I incorrect by saying that we basically had the major role of creating the internet?
We did create the internet. It was funded by the federal government, by DARPA. It was originally called DARPANet. The defense, I forget what DARPA stands for other than the D is defense. Defense Advanced Research Program or something like that project. Yeah, in any case, yeah, we did it.
Money?
Pardon?
How does DARPA get its money to do these things?
DARPA got its money from your and my taxes.
Yes.
We invented the internet.
For the world.
Yeah.
We created this for, I feel like I had a personal role in it because, again, I pay my taxes.
Yeah.
This is my internet that I paid for. And now she's trying to convince me and other people to go against her own best interest. There is a spin to it. She's not talking truth. All she's trying to do is spin something to make people go against their own best interest. That's my internet that I paid for to help create. And it's about the free flow of information of this world. And I come from a time, like I'm old enough now to look back at the way it used to be to the way it is now. I'm in amazement that I can get on my computer and have an instant conversation with a customer of ours in Australia, where before the same person, maybe 15, 20 years ago, would have to use a ham radio to get in touch. The free flow of communication, the free flow of information, it's for humanity. And it was my doing, just as much as yours as an American citizen. And this woman is not going to convince me to go against my own best interest. In fact, this interview makes me want to call my senators and congressmen every single second of every day to tell them, do not do this. Do not do this to the world. Do not do this to humanity. It is a decline. And I encourage anybody who's listening to your show that this is a big enough, this is a huge, huge matter. Huge. I think it's beyond healthcare. I think it's beyond a lot because it's the free flow of information. I get to learn things about places of the world that otherwise I would never be able to know. And they want to charge me every time I want to learn something about this planet that I live in, to talk to my fellow the humanity and to talk to other people across the world in the way that I feel unrestricted without having to be a rich person to be able to pay for it. This is insane.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate your program more than you know. I've always said this. I really think, Tom, that you're the right person to get into politics because you're a decent man and you're intelligent, and I think you have your thumb on the button.
Well, thank you, Kitty. It's you just did a brilliant rant. You should be a talk show host. If you're going to say I should be a politician, I'll honor you back. Kitty, I've got to move along, but thank you so much for the call and for a really, truly great rant. It's great to hear from you. Thank you. Karen in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Karen, what's on your mind?
Well, I'm watching the show. Hi, Tom, by the way. And quite honestly, I think that Dr. Layton either doesn't know about peering or is choosing to ignore that, because here's the deal with content content providers themselves. If you run a website, you have to pay an ISP or something to host a site.
Right.
People are already doing this.
Yep.
And so if you don't want to have adult content, or if you don't look at YouTube or whatever entertainment things that she doesn't do, that's fine. You're not going to do it. It's
right.
Nothing.
And you can buy a cheaper service, by the way. You can say, you know, I don't need 100 MIPS of download speed. I can do 5 MIPS of download speed because I'm just going to do simple HTML stuff and, you know, get a super discount package.
Exactly. We already regulate it like water, how much you use, or
but not how you use it. We don't, you know, the water company doesn't say, oh, you're taking a bath, you know, or you're drinking this water. Those are essential functions. So we're going to charge you $10 a gallon for that water. But if you're mowing the lawn, that's not an essential function. So we'll give you that water for 5 cents a gallon. They don't do that. They're not allowed to do that.
Conditions of the water. We're not allowed to have lead in the water past a certain point. Things like that.
Right.
And here's the deal. She talks about 5 unelected individuals in the SPC. Yes, that's true. However, we have even less unelected individuals running these ISPs.
That's right. Who elected the head of Comcast? Right.
Sorry, what was that?
Who elected the head of Comcast?
Exactly. We don't have a choice in some cases. ISPs have done a great job at consolidating themselves and doing away with any sort of municipal broadband initiative and all this stuff. And quite honestly, there's one thing I want to say, and that's Ajit Pai, the chairman of the FCC, is a big fan of the Big Lebowski, and his, quote, open and free internet rules that basically do away with net neutrality and Title II protection. It would be like allowing the ISP CEOs to come in and pee all over the internet rug.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Karen, thank you very much. We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Anytime you get the Big Lebowski and a metaphor coming down the road, you start going, uh-oh. Anyhow, we'll be right back. And welcome back. Oh, man. What a day, huh? Chuck in Riverside, California, watching us on YouTube. Hey, Chuck, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I had a quick question. I wanted to get your opinion on what you think how you think the Democratic Party is going to run in 2020. Because I think you and I both know that the best option to defeat Trump is to run a Bernie Sanders type candidate, someone who's truly progressive, who's truly fighting for the people, who doesn't have all the external corporate interests behind him. But I'm starting to sort of fear that the Democratic primaries in 2020 are going to be like the Republican primaries or like 2012, where it's just like a state people who are just trying to get the best zingers, so that way more people will know their name. Because, I know that it's seeming to me that Bernie's going to run again. It seems like Elizabeth Warren's going to run this time. But I also hear that senators and representatives like Tulsi Gabbard and Kamala Harris are going to run. And I even heard a rumor that Caroline Kennedy might throw her hat in the ring. And I'm not saying that those are bad people, but I'm a bit afraid of having so many people clashing as opposed to having sort of a more clear and concise vision.
Yeah.
And especially if it's like a Bernie Hillary opposition.
Well,
again,
that's inevitably going to happen. I mean, that's intrinsic to the primary process. And right now you can watch, particularly Cory Booker and Kamala Harris are positioning themselves to be sort of the middle of the road Democrats, or the liberal Democrats, but not Bernie-crats, as the candidates. And then you've got Elizabeth Warren, who up until last week, I was skeptical that she really wanted to run. But then, she made that trip to Afghanistan and stuff. I mean, she's doing the things that people do when they're planning on running for political office. Although it may have been just, she was on a committee and it was important to go on that meeting, or on that trip rather. But I'm seeing the Democratic Party kind of splitting into camps, and those camps slowly moving forward. And it's gonna depend on what kind of response they get, on what kind of response they get from the donor class, on what kind of response they get from the base, on what kind of response they get, when they try to go out there. Cory Booker, for example, when he got caught with his hand in the cookie jar around the pharmaceuticals stuff, that he had voted against legislation that would have allowed the importation of drugs after taking lots and lots of money from pharma. He has, he got outed for that, and he's now come out and said, I'm not taking any more money from pharma. Well, but he's still taking money from the banks. And so, is there going to be, how many things? So it's like, it's interesting to watch, how this is playing out. But everybody wants to be the next Obama or the next, Bill Clinton, I guess. And I think that the times have moved past that, Chuck. I agree with you. I think that only the next Bernie, and maybe even Bernie, although 76 is going to be quite a lift, but only the next Bernie can, I think, really take on the Republican Party and win. We need another FDR.
Yeah, and another very quick, short question: if it's not Bernie, like if he doesn't run, or if he just doesn't win the primaries, which I highly doubt if he does run, who would you want to see run?
Elizabeth Warren.
Get the nomination.
I would put my money on Elizabeth Warren in a heartbeat. I think she's spectacular. Chuck, I got to run, but thank you very much for the call, and thanks for watching us on YouTube. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Let's check in with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. This report brought to you by Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do, and goatsfortheoldgoat.com. On the line with us is Ellen Ratner herself. Hey, Ellen.
That's right. Okay, well, another off-camera briefing by Sarah Huckabee Sanders today. They just are not doing on-camera briefings.
I have two possible reasons for that, and I'm curious your take on this, if I may interrupt you, Ellen.
Go ahead.
Okay. Number one, they're not doing on-camera briefings because Donald Trump is jealous that some other people in his administration are getting more face time than him. Or number two, they're not doing on-camera briefings because they know if they do it on camera, there's video evidence of it, And when Trump tweets something that contradicts them the next day, it'll be trotted out and they'll look like a fool. Which is it, or is it both?
It's both. It's actually both, but I'm going to go with the first one. If I had to go to a 60-40, I'm going to go with 60 on the first one and 40 on the second.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Forgive my interrupting.
Both, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the president has already left, actually, for France. He's going to have dinner tomorrow night, I guess, at the Eiffel Tower, on top of the Eiffel Tower, with the president of France. And then he'll be there for Bastille Day. It's also the 100th anniversary of the United States entering World War I. So there's going to be some participation by our armed forces in that as well. Now, today, this is very interesting. Christopher Wray is up for FBI director.
Right.
He was asked whether he would be independent, and he was very clear about that. He said that he would absolutely be independent, that he was reliant on the Constitution of the United States. That's where his allegiance was, and it was not to any president. He was then asked very specific questions about the Mueller case, et cetera, Mueller being the special independent counsel. And he really sort of side-swiped on that one, didn't really answer. And then actually Dianne Feinstein asked about the torture memos. By the way, the tough questions about his allegiance were asked by none other than Lindsey Graham, who's not exactly a Democrat. Of course, he did run for president.
Right.
But then Dianne Feinstein asked about the torture memo. He said he had no input into the torture memo. Kind of interesting.
Although didn't another member point out that his name was cited in the torture memo, that John Yoo and Jay Bybee just used him?
Cited, but he said he remembers nothing and that he did not have input into it. So I don't know who you believe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I would believe anybody over John Yoo or Jay Bybee, frankly. Back to you.
Okay. This is interesting. The Democrats, Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, is calling on he said all of this is profoundly troubling and should be investigated by the special prosecutor. This has to do with Donald Jr. Meeting with that supposedly person from the Kremlin, although she said she's not from the Kremlin. So anyhow, he's calling for more investigation onto that. Today is also the Net Neutrality Day of Action, and the head of the Democratic National Committee is talking about that, saying call your member of Congress and demand net neutrality.
Yeah. And we just debated somebody from the CEI, AEI, one of AEI, American Enterprise Institute, telling us how wonderful it would be to destroy net neutrality. It was bizarre.
Oh, please, give me a break.
Yeah.
You and I'd be paying through the nose.
Yep. Well, that's the whole point. You know, it's all about the money.
It's all about the money. That is for sure. Okay. Now, it's very interesting. Yesterday, we actually, through our own defense agency, we actually put up a fake missile, and we shot it down in Kodiak, Alaska. They tracked and intercepted the target, and so that's kind of interesting. Also, the DEA, that's the Drug Enforcement Agency, went after Mallinckrodt, and it looks like they may have gotten something like $25 million. I don't know the exact amount, but they are now saying that Mallinckrodt is not giving, when they see false prescriptions being written, they're supposed to notify the FDA, and they have not been doing that.
What or who is Mallinckrodt?
It's one of the drug companies.
Ah, okay. One of the ones that makes opiates?
In fact, they've been around a million years because in my late teens, I was in the Mallinckrodt unit at Mass General, where they actually do all kinds of testing to see if you're shutting off growth hormone and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if it still exists, but it did exist then. So they've been around as a drug company for a very long period of time.
Okay.
All right. Now, some other issues going on. It looks like, now this is a big concern to everybody and should be. I was in Antarctica. I was given a trip there for my 60th birthday. I'm now an old bat, older than that. but one of the biggest icebergs ever recorded broke away from one of the shelves, the Larsen C shelf in Antarctica. I was actually on the Larsen shelf. I don't know if I was on a Larsen C or not, but I was definitely on Larsen. And they said that it's 6,000 square kilometers, about a quarter of the size of the country or the area, whatever you want to call it, of Wales.
Yeah, it's the same size as Delaware, I guess.
I think so.
Huge.
It's very, very large. It broke off. Now they're saying that it is not going to rise the oceans because, of course, it was already there, but that it's calving because it's getting warm is a major concern in Antarctica.
Yeah, and if you go to arctic-news.blogspot.com, it was raining in the Arctic last week. I mean, it's like, and it's not supposed to rain in the Arctic.
It's supposed to snow.
Right. It's 60 degrees warmer than it's supposed to be. And I mean, it's just, the weather has gone crazy. It's just, anyway, back to you, Ellen.
Okay. Also, this is very interesting. The Federal Trade Commission has banned 2 telemarketing firms from doing business in Maryland. What they were doing is they would call up a place like yours or mine and say, oh, we have some free material for you. Do you want to do it? So, of course, you know, being stupid, somebody like me would say yes, and then we would get a bill for them. So now they are absolutely, the FDA is saying you cannot do telemarketing at all. And these are 2 Maryland-based companies.
Interesting.
Now, last but not least here, the New Jersey governor, Chris Christie's fixer at the Port Authority, is going to avoid prison. However, he has got to do 500 hours of community service. It's David Wildstein, I guess is his name. He has to serve 3 years per probation, pay a $10,000 fee, $14,314 in restitution, but he does not have to do jail time. Now, how this is going to affect Chris Christie will be very interesting because, of course, so far he's sort of gotten away with absolutely nothing. It was really interesting when he was running for president. I actually heard him in Iowa, and he was asked what he would do his first day at the presidency, and he gave a Trump-like answer. He said, well, I'd fire people that weren't loyal. I believe in loyalty. Right. I mean, this is a guy that was running for president of the United States.
Didn't I want to say Bridget or Gretchen, it's a Germanic name, the woman who was his kind of press secretary person, right hand, didn't she flip? I mean, she got sentenced to jail time, didn't she? Didn't somebody turn on him? I mean,
I actually think what happened is most of the people that worked with him actually did turn on him and say that he ordered it.
On Christie.
It may have only been 2 out of the 3, but I think there were 3 people originally. And they turned on him, yes, because they realized that they're going to go nowhere. Now, we're also hearing, you're not going to believe this, sit down for this one, Tom, that he is thinking, Chris Christie is thinking of taking a talk sports job.
Yeah, I know. He auditioned for it day before yesterday, I think it was, and somebody called up and called him a, well, I don't want to, call him a slur, shall we say?
On radio.
Yeah, right. Well, I think you can say it on radio. It's just disrespectful to people who are overweight, so I'm not going to. But yeah. Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News. Ellen, it is always great talking with you. You are the most informative out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be back. Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.
I'm Nina Turner, and you're watching Free Speech TV.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. With few exceptions, but this is page 176. With few exceptions, most Native American cultures did not have our notions as part of their collective mythos. Instead of the story that we're separate from creation and born to dominate it, these older cultures held a different view of the place of humans in the order of creation. They believe we are part of the world. We are made of the same flesh as other animals. We eat the same plants. We share the same air, water, soil, and food with every other life form on the planet. We are born into life by the same means as other mammals, and when we die, like them, we become part of the soil that will nourish future generations. They also believe it is our destiny to cooperate with the rest of creation. Every life form has its special purpose in the grand ecosystem, and all are to be respected, they believed. Each animal and plant has its own unique intelligence and spirit. We are permitted to compete with other plants and animals, but we may not wantonly destroy them. All life is absolutely as sacred as human life. Although hunting and killing for food are part of nature's order, when we do so, it must be done with respect and thankfulness. Older cultures are most often cooperators, not dominators. There are human cultures who do not engage in the destruction of the world. They demonstrate that destruction and domination are not an inevitable part of human nature. Prior to the emergence of younger cultures about 7,000 years ago, the anthropological record shows that not one culture believed itself to be separate from and superior to nature. We find the remnants of these older cultures in tribal people around the world, such as the San, the Kogi, the Ik of Uganda, the Navajo, the Hopi, the Cree, the Ojibwa, living in harmony with the world around them, the people around them, and seeing all life as sacred. The San Bushmen don't even qualify as Stone Age, since they've never used stone implements, only tools made from wood. And yet they were successfully pursuing their way of life 40,000 years before Aristotle, and they still are. They leave behind few traces, as they are such masters of resource management. That's sustainability. And contrary to the stories of our culture, it was and is often a happy and comfortable life. When we lived like that thousands of years ago, we enjoyed cradle-to-grave security. The tribe took care of itself. We cared for one another. If anybody had food, everybody had food. If anybody had a diseased child or an infirm parent, everybody had a diseased child or an infirm parent. The measure of wealth in such societies was security. Mediums of exchange like money were unnecessary. The idea of hoarding food or other things was unthinkable because everybody was responsible for everybody. Our ancient ancestors lived in the way of all other cooperator societies in nature, but be they the society of wolves or chimpanzees or prairie dogs, they looked out for one another. Our ancestors, people like you and me of all races and all continents, lived like this all over the world for 40 to 200,000 years, depending on whose archaeology you accept. And then there were eruptions among traditional cultures. In some parts of the world, people began to move away from their hunting and gathering lifestyle by experimenting with agriculture. This created more efficient food production, thus increasing their numbers and giving some people the ability to hoard food, the beginning of what we call wealth. Then a subgroup of the agriculturalists began experimenting with a new cultural idea of coercive or forced evangelism, of bringing others into their culture in a way that had never been done before. Their gods told me that if they couldn't evangelize others, then they should utterly destroy them. They were a very few, probably not more than a dozen tribes, which arose out of the tens of thousands of tribes that populated the planet. And this small number of tribes proceeded to wipe out and displace and destroy the thousands of other tribes who were living in a sustainable, peaceful, and connected to nature way. They left the garden and began to create dominating city-states and then empires. They were the first people infected with Wetiko, the origin of our younger culture. And because of this, they had become more efficient at increasing their own numbers. They had more sunlight under their own personal control. Of course, there was a price to pay for this. While the San, Kogi, Ik, and other native peoples may spend less than 2 to 4 hours a day gathering food and attending to the needs of life, and due to this day, by the way, in younger culture societies, this balance was radically shifted as average people must work longer and harder just to survive. Those who were the dominating individuals in the culture, however, could live luxuriously and work less and less. So for every person who only worked an hour or two a day, another person would have to work 4 or 8 or 10 hours a day or more. Without massive exploitation of resources or theft from others, for every person with 10 times as much wealth, 10 people must have only 1/10 as much. Social and economic classes were born, and the first governments came into being to define, order, and control the socio-economic structure and help the wealthy maintain and increase their riches. Whether they knew it or not, these governments, mostly kingdoms in the early days, transmitted younger culture values to all citizens, rich and poor. The power brokers of this time programmed the consciousness of their subjects, just as our governments, educational institutions, and mass media do today. Nobody knows what brought about the first eruption of Wetiko cultural insanity, but logic suggests it was most likely happened in places where food resources were only cyclically abundant. For example, the Tlingit and Weda Native American tribes of the Pacific Northwest and the area around Vancouver Island were apparently extensive traders and owners of slaves. And this was because they could store food. This is where it all began, beginning wealth. Anyhow, the book is The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. This is just a small dip into it.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And in the studio with us is Charles Sauer, libertarian economist and president of the Market Institute, marketinstitute.org. You can tweet him at Charles Sauer, is S-A-U-E-R, and at Charles Sauer. And Charles, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
It's always nice having you with us. So you are a libertarian.
I am.
And so I'm curious. Here we've got the Republicans are trying to do their health care bill. Or their tax cut for billionaires, however, whatever you want to call it. And apparently, it hasn't been officially announced, but the gossip in this town is that Mitch McConnell submitted legislation to the CBO either yesterday or the day before so that they'll have a score on Friday and they can vote on it on Friday or Monday. But basically, it's to dial back Obamacare.
Yeah.
What is the libertarian answer to health?
So the libertarian answer to free markets or to healthcare is free markets. And so we've talked about this before, but you see it in things like plastic surgery, but in the real world closer to healthcare, you see it in direct primary care. You also see it in some newer practices in Oklahoma and Virginia and California. But realistically, it's giving more power to the patient and putting them together. But you know, I wish I could say that they were doing that in what Mitch McConnell was proposing. I've been supportive of what he's proposing, but in general, it doesn't really restore free market pressure.
So let's say I'm the patient and I get a cancer diagnosis and I'm making 50 grand a year.
Yeah.
And I have no health insurance because I have your freedom, right?
Yeah.
How does that help me? I'm going to die.
Yep. Well, if you don't have insurance, you are, first off, you've made some sort of a choice not to have insurance, right? You're making $50,000 a year. You're over the poverty.
Let's say I'm making $30,000 a year. So that's half of America, by the way.
Yeah, no, that's a large chunk of America. And what we have right now is kind of the worst of all systems, right? We have a government-private system that definitely doesn't work. And so you have the government coming in and reimbursing for some things, but they take a long time to pay for other things.
But you're not answering my question. How does your freedom help me if I can't afford the insurance and I've got cancer?
Yeah, so the free market actually has much lower costs than the current system. There's a Dr. Juliet Madrigal Dersh. She's out of Austin, Texas. She can get chemotherapy. It's for her patients that are like a 10th or an 8th or way below
when my wife
market
did
prices.
chemo, it cost $100,000. So I can get chemo for $10,000. I'm making $30,000 a year. That's $25,000 a year after taxes. And you want me to spend $10,000 on chemo from a discount doctor in Oklahoma?
Yeah,
This is your answer?
I want what I don't want is for the bad system we have now, where $10,000. There's people that would help that $10,000 out.
So you want me to run a GoFundMe page? That's your healthcare program.
Well, right now you're using the government as a GoFundMe page, and they're always buying it from the most expensive crony they can find, and that's because the left likes supporting those cronies.
No, that's
so
because
they like giving them the $9 extra.
The Republicans required in Medicare Part D that Medicare could not negotiate drug prices, and that's the one area where we pay the highest prices. Medicaid, in fact, one of the complaints about Medicaid and Medicare is that they don't reimburse as high as some insurance companies.
Well, no, they don't. That's not the one area where they pay more prices. It's the hospital care. We have better drugs here than other people. We have better health care here.
We don't have better drugs
than
here.
in
Most
other
of our
countries.
drugs are, 75% of the drugs consumed in the United States are manufactured outside the United States. And Republicans, voted to make it illegal to import the exact same drugs that you're buying at Walgreens or CVS from Canada.
This is the difference between the left and the right. The actual
I'm advocating for a free market
where
in pharmaceuticals.
Where the value comes from in pharmaceuticals is the R&D, not the manufacturing.
And we pay for
you
that
can
with our tax
manufacture
dollars.
where you want.
But
no, these companies pay for it by themselves.
No, look it up, Charles. That's not true. The vast majority of new drug, capital N-E-W, new drug research is paid for with federal money. The money that the companies are spending on R&D is to take the Prozac molecule and move one hydroxyl group from here to here, so it still does the same thing, but we can call it a new drug, and we can take that $15 a pill drug that's going to become $1 a pill generic, and we can prevent it from going generic. That's what they do.
The government pays for the moonshot research, right? The research that, and look, I benefit from this. My wife suffers from migraines, and there's not a lot of money in going after migraines, although that they affect a ton of people across the country. But the government does moonshot research, and then the private companies come in and using the tech transfer offices that the government set up, they figure out what can be commercialized. And the value comes in that research, but then when they take it out and figure out, then sending it to the manufacturer and everything else. But we get the drugs are the R&D is done here, and it's not all the government.
So, we're starting to go around in circles here. What if you can't tell me how, as an average American worker, I mean, the median household income in the United States is around 50 grand, but the median individual income is around 30 grand. So I'm making $30,000 a year. I can't afford health insurance. I don't have a plan. I get a cancer diagnosis. You have said that my choice is to fly to Oklahoma and beg chemo from this one doctor who's willing to sell it at cost, and put up a GoFundMe page to pay for that. I get that. So can you tell me where in the world libertarian healthcare policies have actually worked?
Well, first off, are you not willing to do that to take care of your family? I mean, you need to be willing to do that.
I would have to quit work to go to Oklahoma, which means that my family gets wiped out.
No, I'm not willing to fund you at 9 times value. Me as a taxpayer, I'm not willing to fund you as 9 times value just because you're unwilling to go someplace to fund something. But that's not the question. The real question here is what's the other solution? And because we know just funding healthcare for the poor through Medicaid doesn't work, right? We have the study in Oregon that was a randomized scientific study that said when you expand Medicaid to the poor, health doesn't increase. There's no more health factor for these people.
Right. What that study found, though, you're misrepresenting the study. What the study found was that the vast majority of people didn't know that they had access to Medicaid. And it takes, for people who've literally throughout their lives never had access to health care, they don't literally even know how to make a doctor's appointment in some cases. and particularly in some of the rural areas in Oregon. What that study found was that in the first 2 years of Medicaid expansion, that you basically have to go tell people that this is available to them. You have to provide some sort of an additional 5% cost to advertise it and promote it. But that's neither here nor there.
No, that's an interesting way to portray it. Look, they were overrun. The reason we have the study is that when they advertised the increase in Medicaid, they were overrun with people, so they didn't know what to do. It was people that wanted coverage, and so that's what you just said is completely wrong for how it was done.
You can take it that way, but I encourage you to actually read the study. But the reason why we have an army, rather than you have an army and I have an army, is because we've decided as a people since 1789, we have decided as a people that the risk of being invaded is a risk that is best mitigated by all of us, even though your probability of having your house burned down by the British or the fill in the blank, the Canadians, the Mexicans, the Russians, God only knows, or my risk of having my house or my boat burned down are pretty slim. But we all kick in to fund the military. Public health is a serious issue. If somebody, if I'm walking down the street and there's somebody with multi-drug resistant tuberculosis coughing as I walk by, I could end up with a disease that's incurable and fatal. And those diseases, by the way, exist right now in the world. Shouldn't everybody in the United States, setting aside economic arguments, but as an issue of national security, shouldn't everybody in the United States have access to health care, particularly in this era of terrorism? There could be bioterrorism.
Well, first off, it would have been a better example to use the Navy, because it's actually the way that we have a standing army now was written opposed in the writing by our founders. The standing Navy is legal, but you're right that's why we do have a standing army. I think the right and left and libertarians and we agree with having these standing groups. It's not, if you want healthcare prices to be where they should be, if you want access to healthcare to be where it should be, then if you really want to help stop those things, you want to increase the free market. You want to increase competition.
It's a real simple question. If having a military is essential to our safety, how is having healthcare not essential to our safety? How is this not an issue of not just the general welfare, but also, I think that if you take the preamble to the Constitution and you were to apply health care to every single piece of it, to create a more perfect union, to establish justice, isn't it just that everybody has access to health care? Ensure domestic tranquility. We're not going to have riots from people, zombie apocalypse, because everybody has health care. Provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. How can I have liberty? How can I be free if I have cancer and I have no way of dealing with it?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. It's when you're by making healthcare free, you're taking away freedoms from other people, right? You're taking away the freedoms of the doctors.
Enhancing the freedom of my entire society by making everybody well.
Based on your definition. And so in the military, you say, we want to have a military, and now we have an all-volunteer force. They volunteer and sign up. We pay them when they want to go. But in
I know,
healthcare,
it's a dystopia. It's a terrible thing. So, Charles, we have 1 minute left before we hit a break that I can't postpone any longer. I mean, it's just the machine will do it. Is there any country in the world that has implemented libertarian healthcare economics that you can point to and say we should do what they do?
We are starting to implement libertarian healthcare here because Obamacare is killing the system. We started with 280 insurance companies in the individual market. We're down to 140 insurance companies in the individual market. So we are currently implementing the libertarian system here, and where we're seeing it implemented, it's taking off, reducing cost, increasing access, and increasing quality.
So the United States is your example.
It's the beginning of my example. Just starting.
Of libertarian economic and wow. Our healthcare system is dysfunctional, Charles. You don't want to claim that.
It is starting because the system is dysfunctional. It's growing because the system is dysfunctional. And Obamacare has accelerated. Healthcare sharing ministries have increased from a couple 100,000 to more than 1 million families. DPC practices have gone from random to across the country and accepted.
Okay. All right. Charles, you have the last word. Charles Sauer, libertarian economist, president of the Market Institute, marketinstitute.org. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you.
Good to see you. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Your calls, my thoughts, and the news of the day right after this. Welcome back. Let's see here. Kevin, watching Free Speech TV on a Roku box in Carmichael, California. Hey, Kevin, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. Can
Hey,
you hear me?
I do. What's up?
Great. You know, I got to say something about this woman that you were interviewing about net neutrality.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've heard a lot of people come on there and say some really terrible things, but that woman and her perspective just enraged me. I just, you know, it was what she was trying to argue, basically, it sounded to me, is that because she is personally offended by porn or Netflix, that she has the right to say that those things should be more expensive and the things she likes should be less expensive. And I mean, does that sound like some fascist craziness to you, or what?
Well, it sounds like an attempt to make an argument. I think that she was defending the indefensible, and I would not want to be in her shoes. But yeah,
that really scared me. I mean, I don't know how much of that kind of.
Well, and she's one of the real experts in the field who, on the right, and so what you heard from her is their best argument for net neutrality, or for destroying net neutrality.
Yeah,
So.
but the thing about that is that, I work on the internet. That's part of my job, and the site that I work for, I'm not going to name names, but it is part of the part of the internet that she would like to basically charge more for.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for a fact that if that were to happen, websites like the one I work for would fold, and we would all be out of a job.
Right.
And what they're trying to do is going to hurt people like me.
Well, and not just like you, Kevin. I mean, if Comcast decides that they don't like a website called ComcastSucks.com, they can block it if there's no net neutrality. If they decide that they want everybody to watch NBC, but they don't want people to watch ABC or CBS, they can slow them down unless you pay extra. Or even if you do pay extra, they can slow them down. They can do anything they damn well please because they now own the internet, not you and me.
Right.
And that's crazy.
It is crazy, and it's frightening. I'm legitimately scared that when this thing passes, that you're going to see these kind of premium packages for the internet, and that I could be I could be on the street. I really could, and I'm not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, we're looking. I mean, it's not just the internet industry, as it were, or internet-related industry. It's industry sector after industry sector. We're seeing this massive consolidation at the very top that is fundamentally anti-competitive, because the first imperative of every company that aspires to be a really, really big company is to destroy their competition. And the two easiest ways to destroy your competition are, number one, to essentially block them, to lock them out of the marketplace in some way by, coming up with allies and things, or number two, to buy them. And they're doing both. I mean, it's just amazing. So, yeah, I get it, Kevin, and I hope your company does well. I mean, this is also, there's a mind-boggling amount of innovation that has come about as a result of the internet, and the internet is also a great public square for expanding, broadening, and distributing the consequences of innovation, the products of innovation. And all of that will go away when it gets sliced and diced and monetized. I share your concern, Kevin. I'm very concerned about this. And it's a very, very big issue. Kevin, thanks for watching us on Free Speech. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Steve in Phoenix, Arizona. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Well, Tom, it's healthcare, and after listening to Sauer there go off, it just made me sick. We need Medicare for all for our country once and for all.
Yep.
And here's why. To all the folks out there who don't think they need health insurance or you go to this free market stuff. I grew up, I'll give you the story here. I grew up, as an only child back in the 50s and 60s. And, someone might think, I had it made. Well, not so much. And I'm not complaining here. I survived with, hand-me-down clothes and stuff from my cousins and things like that. And here's where we start. About 1960, my folks bought a house for $17,500. A modest house, probably like your folks in Lansing.
Yeah, my dad's house cost him $15,000. It was a little three-bedroom, one bathroom.
Yeah. So then we go to 1962, and my mom was diagnosed with cancer of her vaginal walls. Okay, so she got treatment and she got radiation and such. And the cost of this was $20,000, which was more than the house a couple years sooner.
Right.
The problem is my dad, 6 months prior to this, he had decided to drop the health insurance because he didn't think we needed it and nobody was getting sick.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So the whole cost and burden was upon the family. Now, my mom, they let the hospital amortize the plan out over the years, and my mom finally got it paid for in 1995, 2 months before she died of another battle with cancer.
Wow.
So that should be a good story for everybody, that we need complete coverage, Medicare for all, for everybody.
For 30 years, your family was paying off a hospital bill?
Yes, sir. Wow. In 1962, I was 7 years old. I think we're about 4 years apart by about a week.
Amazing.
And they paid it off. The hospital didn't charge them any interest, and also they did an implant wrong too. They did, but my folks didn't sue because that's what you just didn't do that back in the day,
Right.
So that's the story there, Tom. I know you've got a bunch of other callers and stuff, but I just wanted to toss that out there.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to hear the story, but thank you. It's a good one. CL in Seattle. Hey, CL, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Thank you for letting me join this worldwide conversation brought to us all by you and Mrs. Hartmann and your whole entire
Thanks, CL.
crew.
We have just a minute left, so right to your point, please.
Thank you. I really wanted to focus on net neutrality, and if you could, in each of the days until the 17th, mention on your show that they are only accepting comments at the FCC by citizens until July 17th.
Right.
It's really important for people to take every opportunity to let their voices be heard.
Right. And there's a website, by the way, for this. It's called battleforthenet.com, as far as I can tell.
It's so important for me. I am I own in my hands that I'm speaking to you with my first computer, and it's a very modestly priced but very, very wonderful mobile device, a smartphone, and it gives me access to the world. And I think people in your listening out there who are listening to me right now would be shocked at how little I live on. But this gives me not only a cultured gift that I can
got
access.
it. CL, it's a wonderful thing. Thank you for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back right after this break here at the bottom of the hour.
And welcome to the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Esther Forbes's book, Paul Revere and the World He Lived In. It was actually sent to me in 2010 by Alma Leslow, if I'm reading this right, and thank you for that. And it's actually, I use this book a lot. It's a remarkable book. You'll recall I've talked about how every time our country reboots, you know, it goes through a major transformation. It's the result of, or it follows an economic crash every time we do a positive transformation. And, you know, we've talked about the crash of 1837, the crash of 1856, the crash of 1889, the crash of 1929, all of which provoked, you know, very positive changes. I suppose you could argue the Civil War wasn't a positive change, but this is what provoked the Revolutionary War. This is from page 98 of Paul Revere and the World He Lived in. January 15, 1765, the trade, Merchant Row noted, has been much alarmed this day. Mr. Wheelwright stopped payment and kept his room. A great number of people will suffer by him. Nat Wheelwright was the first of many merchants to collapse that spring. During the war, merchants had increased their stock and speculated. Farmers had enlarged their farm. Those boom years were over. The Depression had begun, and in Boston, it lasted 20 years. January 19th, 1765. Very bad accounts. Dr. John Scolay shut up. Dr. John Denny shut up, and Peter Bourne of the North End. By shut up, they mean close their businesses. Am unlikely to be a large sufferer by Scolay. Now Mr. Rowe is really apprehensive. He is a cautious gentleman, no longer young. Even the walking was dangerous that day. Extreme, bad, and slippery. This is his diaries she's reading from. Next day was Sabbath. Mr. and Mrs. Rowe never missed services at Trinity, but did not go to church. My mind too much disturbed. Just as he should have been starting, his dear friend Joseph Scott had come up to see him very disturbed. Sure enough, next day, Mr. Scott had also shut down his business, and William Hasking and the company had been shut down as well. A bank failed for 170,000 British pounds. Mr. Savage fell in a fatal apocalyptic fit in his lawyer's office. Captain Forbes shut up his shop today. Am much grieved for him, wrote one of the diaries. The merchants were going down like a house of playing cards. Each big house, such as Mr. Rowe mentions, carried innumerable small ones with it. Shipwrights, sailors, and sailmakers might suffer first, but tailors and peruke makers, or peruke makers, button molders or soap boilers, silversmiths or braziers all followed. Rents and mortgages could not be paid. The clergy began to find more copper and less silver in the alms basin. Farmers drove mutton to town, could get no decent price, and angrily drove them home again. Only 1/5 of the usual numbers of ships cleared that water from Boston for the West Indies. Not only was the artificial wartime prosperity over, but the merchants could not pay the duties now demanded of them. They experimented in short runs along the coast or kept their ships laid up as one after another shut down. The stagnation of trade gave everyone, from Mr. Rowe and his fellow merchants like the young Mr. John Hancock, dining as elegantly as ever at the Royal Coffee House, to the meanest porter and the cheapest alehouse, a leisure to talk they had never enjoyed before. Boston went off into a talking jag that did not end until Lexington. That would be the shot heard around the world. Why was there no money to be made on the fine ships which for 100 years had been bringing wealth to Boston? Why was there no work for a willing, able-bodied man? Who was to blame? England's efforts to enforce her navigation acts had upset long-established trade habits, but she had not as yet actually collected enough money over here to pay her customs officials. It seemed to have been the general opinion from the top of the social ladder to the bottom that England was to blame. The overexpansion of the last 40 years probably had as much to do with it as England, but it was the meddlesome tyrant from overseas that was the scapegoat. King George III was popular. Their enemy was Parliament. Grenville, as Chancellor of the Exchequer, looked about for some other form of taxation that could actually produce the money. Controlling smuggling over so long a coast, 3,000 miles away, was proving expensive, impractical, and extremely unpopular. After talking with the colonial agents in London and asking for alternative suggestions, he put the Stamp Act through Parliament. I am not, however, he said, set upon this tax. If the Americans dislike it and prefer any other method, I shall be content, provided the money must be raised. As soon as the Stamp Act went into effect, which it never did, every legal document, every newspaper or commercial paper would need a stamp, costing from a halfpenny to 20 shillings. It would require very few officers to enforce and no breaking and entering of private property. As Grenville argued, it would fall fairly equally on all colonies and classes. But it was technically an internal tax, not an external like a customs duties, and its theory frightened the colonists. Whether or not England had the legal right to tax these colonies in any way she pleased does not seem to be settled yet. Probably she had, but it was the utmost folly to do so. This distinction, this is a quote, this distinction between internal and external taxes seems to be the Inquirer today, as it did to so many in that day, almost a quibble. The one should be universally accepted through generations, and the other start men to their feet shouting liberty or death, has never been satisfactorily explained. Paul Revere in the world he lived in.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All the important stories we cover and the issues we care about are at HartmannReport.com. Members of our community can comment and join the conversation.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and it's Anything Goes summer, although there are a few topics on the plate. Dave in Chicago, listening to WCPT. Hey, Dave, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, I want to talk about net neutrality, if I may.
Please.
Something that nobody really talks about is the fact that right now, the people that give us the internet, the carrier, the ISP, is not allowed to collect data, is not allowed to capture that data. We go to a website, and you are giving away that right, and you allow them to collect the data because you enter their site. That's why if you go shopping on the internet and you go to another website, you're going to see an ad for something that you looked at on Amazon or Google for that same product.
Right, because they're detecting the cookie in your browser from that product.
Right, and the ISPs do not have those cookies.
Right.
If net neutrality goes into effect, those
goes away.
companies can capture everything that you send across their network.
That's right.
Every email, businesses, unless they use these VPNs, virtual private networks, will be subjected to corporate espionage easily. And they don't even talk about that on net neutrality, besides all the money part.
Yeah, it's an excellent and important point. We do video here. We upload and download a lot of video, and there's a fair amount of bandwidth. And I noticed, using Comcast, now this is the consumer end at home, that if I was downloading a large file, that they would down throttle me after about 5 or 10 minutes if it was a file that took 15 or 20 minutes to download. And so I tried using a VPN, and they immediately throttled me to 5 MIPS per minute, or whatever it is. I guess megabytes per second, 5 MIPS. They just immediately throttled me, and I'm not even sure that that's legal. But it's like they're detecting, oh, it's a VPN, so we're gonna dial it back, and maybe now it's 15 or 20. It's been a couple of years since I've done that experiment, but yeah. And the issue of deep packet inspection, of knowing everything you do and everything you say, and your credit card numbers and your personal correspondence and your emails and every single website you visit and whatever information you may both get from that website and give to that website. All of that will be in the hands of your internet service providers. And if you think that Google is a big data operation, wait until this happens. Excellent point.
Absolutely.
Excellent point. Thank you very much for the call. David in Woodland Hills, California. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Thank you, Guru. I read that New Yorker article about global warming, and it was devastating.
Yes, I agree. It's New York Magazine, by the way.
Yeah. I knew 80 to 90% of it, and it's still devastating. But I made a connection I hadn't made before. The scientists were so cowed by the blowback from the billionaires that they deliberately downplayed their predictions for fear they wouldn't be believed. It would be fantasy stuff. And it's the same thing the Democrats did when they didn't talk about voter suppression for fear that people wouldn't vote.
It's so strange that you bring that up, because I had this exact conversation with an old and dear friend of mine. Earl is his first name. We were literally in email yesterday, and we were talking about this, this idea that we shouldn't scare people about bad climate scenarios, and I said I remember back in 2005, 2006, coming to Washington D.C. and meeting with a half a dozen fairly high-profile elected members of Congress.
And it was me and 4 or 5 other people from Air America Radio. It was when Air America was doing well. And, several of us brought up, me and as I recall, Randy Rhodes brought up the issue of electronic voting machines and redshift and how it looked like the machines were being hacked by the Republican Party because all this redshift stuff started just in particular states, just in the swing states, just in the battleground states, and just after the machines were installed. And what we were told by these elected Democrats was, we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to talk about redshift. We don't want to talk about electronic voting machines. It'll cause people to doubt the integrity of our election system, and that will cause them not to come and vote. So don't give them the bad news because it might scare them. And I thought it was a stupid argument at the time. I still think it's a stupid argument, and I think applying that same argument to climate change is equally stupid. And David, all I can say is great minds think alike. Me and Earl having this conversation, you calling in and saying the exact same thing to me. I'm with you. I'm totally with you. So, David, thank you for the call. Spot on. Dominic in Seattle. Hey, Dominic, what's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Tom?
Good. What's up?
Hey, I just wanted to revisit a topic from yesterday about the automated sex robots.
Oh, yeah. Let's not get too explicit here. I got an email from somebody saying, I had kids at home.
No, I understand. So I just had a different theory on that. I think that why they're becoming more popular amongst people is due to Marx's theory of alienation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Only vaguely.
So basically, Marx theorized that under the capitalist system, workers were alienated from their production because private ownership controlled the means of production. So as time goes on and bourgeois society kind of becomes more brutal, then social relationships start to degrade, and under capitalism, everything becomes a commodity. So that's my thought. It just ties in well with that theory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't disagree. I suspect the reason that they're becoming more popular is because technology moves forward, and the technology associated with robotics is following Moore's law. It's cutting every 2 or 3 years or 4 years. It's dropping in price by half and doubling its capacity. So, and we saw that applied to sex with with porn on the internet back 20 years ago. And, it's still there. But I mean, so much of the innovation in video technology came about as a result of porn on the internet. And probably innovations in robotics and prosthesis actually are going to come about as a result of these things. Anyhow, Dominic, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. It's a good theory. Kevin in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Hey, Kevin, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Having a good time here in Santa Fe. Joined Indivisible, and we are getting just great reports here. I was going to ask if people would go to our Indivisible Santa Fe Facebook page and give us a like. And also, I wanted to talk about how, I initially started out, I wanted to say that this email borders on treason, but I'm going to let that
Which email?
Of Mr. Trump Jr.
The one that Don Trump Jr. got that said that, we've got Russian information for you on Hillary and all that kind of stuff?
Or like he's saying, Yahoo, bring it on, I want it.
Yeah.
But as I listen to you, the disturbing news on the Larsen C is like, I want people to go and look at NASA.com and see the new Ghost 16 satellite, because like the Marvel image in the 70s, changing an image of the world, it's going to be very interesting to see what this new science technology can give us from that satellite. This is what Trump is trying to stop. And when we all get a good view of what the world is and can see these storms going on and how what we're doing to the climate really affects it, I think it's going to change some consciousness.
Well, the problem is that the Trump administration is trying to shut down some of those satellites. In fact, they've already shut down one of them. It's not a good time, but, hey, sometimes adversity makes us stronger. Kevin, excellent points all. Thank you, and thanks for listening to KTRC there. Ellen in Ambrose, North Dakota. Hey, Ellen, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Yes, it's wonderful, wonderful show and so informative.
I want to know about One American News.
You know, I'm not going to do any ads for other networks. Sorry. Sam in Davis City, Iowa. Hey, Sam, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. I think you're the smartest guy. You're so intelligent. I don't know why you're not running for office.
Because I'd make a lousy politician, Sam. But I'm a pretty decent talk show host and author, so that's what I stick to. What's up?
Tom, I ran into a guy yesterday, and he started talking about Donald Trump. He said, we got to wait and see. He said, look at all the jobs he created. Well, I didn't want to get in an argument with him. But we talked about that. He's talking about the tax, how we tax the wealthy. He said, Sam, when we tax them, we're taking their money. We need to give their money back. And I don't know how to fight that argument. I don't know what to say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, taxes are the price you pay for a civilized society. I mean, you know, it's very straightforward. And the wealthier you are, the more you are using the infrastructure of this country. The more you're using our court systems, the more you're using our banking system, the more you're using our roads, depending on the products and services that you're providing, the more you're using other things, you know, and it's not inappropriate to say, you know, you've been super blessed. You have a larger obligation to society than somebody who's not as blessed or as competent, for that matter. This is the core idea of progressive taxation. Number one, you know, it's just a reasonable and fairness issue. You wouldn't be rich if people before you had not paid their taxes. And number two, you can't run a country just on taxing the middle class. You've got to tax the rich. And number three, we have tax policy because we want to influence behavior. And right now, with Reaganomics, we've got a tax policy that encourages very wealthy people to hide their money overseas. You've got, you know, big companies like Apple's got a couple $100 billion stashed overseas. There's some $2.5 trillion that Americans have stashed overseas right now, and therefore not subject to taxation, not subject to oversight. And frankly, it's not helping the American economy. So we have made the mistake over the last 30 years of dropping taxes on very wealthy people, which has caused them to become hoarders. And we're seeing an explosion in wealth. I mean, they're hoarding their money, but it's not productive for our economy. If you look at the period of time from 1935 until 1985, basically, when the top tax rate was between 74 and 91%, that was the time when our economy grew the fastest because the wealthiest Americans were paying the highest taxes. There's an absolute relationship. When you have taxes on the rich, when the top tax rate is above 50%, the economy stabilizes. You have a strong middle class. Middle classes are not a normal thing. They don't naturally emerge. The middle classes have to be created. And to a certain extent, they're created by taking money away from very rich people and giving it to what would otherwise be the working poor or very poor people. And thus you end up with a middle class. Now, you do that through things like minimum wage or taxation or whatnot, but you know that's what's necessary. A middle class is not a normal thing. So the question to ask your friend, Sam, is do you want to live in a society that has a middle class? Because if you do, then you need, and do you want to live in a society that has a stable and growing economy? The period of time of the greatest growth and the greatest stability for the middle class was the period of time in the United States was the period of time with the highest taxation. And by the way, you can look at country after country all around the world, and the country with the lowest taxes are the most unstable. The countries with the lowest taxes are the most prone to cyclical depressions. The countries with the lowest taxes are the ones with the greatest income inequality and the most grinding poverty and the biggest problems that have to do with things like public health. And we're starting to see this in the United States. You know, opiate addiction, gonorrhea epidemics. I mean, just god-awful stuff happens when people get wiped out economically. And that's happening because of these low taxes on rich people. Sam, thanks for the call.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
More of your calls right after this. Stick around. And welcome back. Rick, watching Free Speech TV in Weston, West Virginia. Hey, Rick, what's up?
Yeah, that Sauer feller, the libertarian.
Charles Sauer, yeah.
I mean, his argument is obviously so flawed because the so-called free markets are caused controlled now basically by the billionaire class and the multinational corporations. There is no free market in this country anymore. And how anybody can come across and really believe in that type of nonsense. I mean, we've got a pretty big Libertarian Party here in West Virginia. Of course, 50% of the population believes we ought to do away with the Affordable Health Care Act and pass Trump care. So that tells you the intelligence in this state.
Right.
They're just politically uninformed. And they buy into that nonsense all the time. And if the Democratic or an independent party is ever going to succeed in this country, we've got to get a stronger message across. And I totally agree with you. We need another FDR. Thank you.
Agreed and well said, Rick. The one thing that I would change about what you just said is that they're not uninformed. They are malinformed or misinformed. They've been watching Fox so-called news, billionaire Rupert Murdoch's, personal toy, and they have been listening to right-wing hate radio, which also has a lot of Fox personalities on it. And the consequence of that is that they're living in a world that isn't real. They are believing things that are not true. And they believe them to the detriment of themselves, tragically. But beyond that, I totally agree with everything you said, Rick. Brilliant statement. Thank you. Keith in Landrum, South Carolina. Hey, Keith, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
How you doing?
Good.
I was watching the documentary the other night about Amelia Earhart, and the lead investigator was a former deputy chief of the FBI. And while he was interviewing people, he said, I found this people believable because I was watching their body English, and when they were doing it, their eye movement went to the upper left side, which means they were recalling past memories.
If they're right-handed.
I remember that from Thom Hartmann. He was talking about that, about Sean Spicer. So I wonder, is this part of the conspiracy, why they won't show on camera White House briefings?
Oh, that's an interesting theory. It hadn't even occurred to me. But yeah, you can, unless somebody knows NLP as well as somebody watching them does, the thought process has become pretty transparent. And typically for a right-handed person, when they look up into the left, they're accessing memories. When they look up into the right, they're imagining things. When they look to the left or the right, they're hearing, sounds. When they look down into the left, they're basically rehearsing things they're going to say. When they look down into the right, they're checking out their feelings. And for left-handed people, it's the mirror image, and for some right-handed people, it's the mirror image. But from that data, which is immediately accessible. I mean, the eyes are actually the only part of the brain that is external to the body. And so you're literally looking at the brain functioning when you're looking at somebody's eyes. With that data, it is possible to tell when somebody's lying. And so, yeah, it's not always possible. Yeah, I just touched my nose. That's a sign that somebody's not sure what they're saying. It's not always possible to tell that somebody's lying, but it is.
Yeah, well, you need to be aware of those poker tells.
Yeah, there you go. There you go, Keith. And it's not like it's a brand new science or something, because, yeah, poker players have known this stuff for years. Keith, thanks a lot for the call. That's a great theory. I like it. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Patricia in Lakewood, Washington, listening on KBCS. Hey, Patricia, what's up?
Oops. Hi, Tom. I was calling in to find out, with everything kind of dissipating from all the marches and all the movements and everything, and the Women's March, and just not seeing very much going on lately, I just wanted to find out what your thoughts were on what the next step is to really grab the attention of our government and to show the world that Americans really care what's going on, because I really don't see too much going on, but I know that there's a lot of things that we could still do.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to find out, because it's really frustrating, and there's lots of movements coming up and then just kind of falling apart.
Yeah, I think that the next step, Patricia, is what OurRevolution.com and the Indivisible group, and I'm forgetting their website. It's indivisible something.org, but in any case, it used to be indivisibleguide.org, but I think that they've got a new website. I could be wrong. But anyhow, what Indivisible, and it's easily Google. Yeah, indivisibleguide.com. Thank you, Troy. The Indivisible Group and Bernie's group, Our Revolution, what they're doing is on the ground, grassroots retail politics. Whether it's showing up at town hall meetings being held by Republicans, or whether it's helping promote Democrats, progressive Democrats, that's what they're doing. And I think that that's the next big thing, frankly.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Good talking to you, Patricia. I appreciate the call. Guy in Schaumburg, Illinois. Hey, Guy, what's on your mind?
Hey, Tom, how you doing? Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you.
I'm just calling in about the net neutrality comment. Just correction that I know. I've been in IT for a while, but if it goes away, and I'm a fan of the law, ISPs actually can't read all the data that you're downloading and inspect it. As long as there's an SSL certificate on the website, as long as it's HTTPS, they actually can't read your stream or what you're browsing. They can't see the websites that you're going to and still do sinister things, sell your data, what you're surfing and what you're hitting. But it's actually you'd still be safe and secure.
Do you think that even when you're using secure socket layer encryption, that if your ISP literally sees everything you're doing, that they would be able to de-encrypt that data? I mean, why not?
Because I do work with firewalls. So in our company, to do that deep packet inspection, you need to actually have that certificate on the firewall. So when the traffic comes, the firewall can use that certificate for the session to decrypt the traffic,
right? Then
inspect it. Then they can see what you're hitting, IP, ports, protocols. Then they re-encrypt it and send it back to the site that you're going to. So it's actually still safe.
So why
if they
can't
start doing the in the middle kind of decryption? Then then I'm going to be annoyed for sure.
Yeah, I mean, why couldn't Comcast do that if they chose to?
They would have to restructure the way you're reading websites. You'd have to go through. If Comcast set up a portal for you to go to, and then you click on different sites on the Comcast portal, and I use Comcast, then they could technically issue a certificate for you and do the intercept in there.
Right, and they essentially become the Uber certificate, as it were, or the Uber level, not the car company, but I mean, the German word for over. And, everything you're doing is coming through their portal. I mean, if net neutrality is blown up, these companies are going to completely reconfigure the way that they deliver Internet traffic to us. Are they not?
Right. That's the big difference. That is exactly the difference, right? Or use a Tor browser, just...
Yeah, but even Tor browsers, I mean, first of all, by using a Tor browser, you're almost waving your hands and saying, hey, NSA, look at me.
Right.
Because, the other big users of the Tor browsers are people like ISIL and drug dealers.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
But, it's just, I don't know. The whole thing to me is whether it's deep packet inspection, whether it's slicing and dicing the Internet, whether it's slowing down competing sites or speeding up, simpatico sites or sites that, pay for speeding up and things like that. All of these things at every level are just, they just totally creep me out, Guy.
And you know what annoyed me with Comcast? Halfway through my contract, they implemented that 10 terabyte limit, that you can only download 10 terabytes, which to people on average, I think it was like, 600 gig or something like that. Right. Even streaming, listening to you and all the other stations all day. But, once you go beyond that, like gaming, then they tag you with the extra surcharge.
Yeah.
Because it's a data play. Now you're streaming. And then guess what Comcast put on right after that? They put Netflix as an app on your box. So now you're using data to watch Netflix.
There you go. Guy, thanks for the call. Good talking with you. We'll be back tomorrow. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. Today is the National Day of Action on net neutrality. Let the FCC know what you think. And gofccyourself.com is one site. And don't forget, democracy requires all of us. Get out there, get active, tag.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, ecowine.com.
Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242
or visit tomsbeets.com.